Oh, he wanted a mic check.
Yeah, we'll do that. So,
Okay, we are live. Julie, if you could go ahead and just go down and just say 1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Charles,
1, 2, 1, 2.
Daniel,
1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2.
3, 4, 3, 4.
1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Ooh, that'll wait.
It works.
That'll wait, Rodney.
You know, and it probably wouldn't hurt for us to just pick it up and put it toward our mouths anyway for the people who may have a harder time understanding us. So it's a courtesy we could do.
You can, never mind.
All right, we're good? All right, so let's go ahead and come to order. Want to welcome everybody to the August edition of the City of St. Charles School Board meeting. Definitely a lot to talk about. Want to acknowledge all of the people that we've heard from over the past week, and looking forward to a really good conversation tonight. So can we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we will begin as we always do with our superintendent's summary and comments. Dr. Seifert.
Thank you, Mr. Keene. Thank you, Mr. Keene. Welcome tonight to tonight's board meeting. We're glad to have you all virtually tonight with us. Quick note before I make a couple of comments about what's happened this week and kind of our reentry plan. I do want to say that the NTO, our new teacher orientation, was this week for the last 3 days, and we just want to wish our new teachers all the best as they start their careers here in the St. Charles School District, and we're so glad they're part of our team. So welcome to our new teachers. We just had a great work session tonight. Thank you to our principals for sharing details of the in-person reentry plan. I want to start my comments by thanking the Board of Education, the central office team, the SCA leadership. Mr. Kearns, thanks for being here tonight, and our awesome staff for continuing to push on working on revising our reentry plans together. I also want to thank the parents, community members, and staff who communicated with us over the past days. We've received some great constructive feedback that was well used. We are here united to discuss the tweaks and changes to our reentry plan and to get a final approval from our board. Under these extraordinary circumstances of an ever-changing pandemic, I'm pleased with the plan our SCSD United team and our staff has put together. The proposed plan gives our families a choice of in-person and virtual learning to meet student and family needs. This plan, nor any plan, is perfect or without holes. It's just not possible to have a perfect plan that makes everyone happy during a pandemic. However, we must try and serve. Our goal all along has been to provide our families with options that meet their needs in the safest and most direct way possible. This type of plan, or any plan, cannot be possible without our staff. Thank you to our certified teaching and classified staff for making it even possible for us to serve our families and students in different ways through this time. Let me please remind us all, this plan nor the pandemic is forever. We are simply putting our best plan forward to reach, teach, and empower all of our students as best as we can during this time. I know there are a lot of questions still to be answered, but I promise you, our staff is on it. We are working day and night to answer the call for our students. Thank you for your continued understanding, patience, grace, and support. We will only get through this time united together. Let's stay positive, focused on making the plan work. We can do this. Now is the time. We are all essential in moving forward. I want to again thank our Board of Education, our SEA leadership, and our CO team. Looking forward to the discussion tonight. And we have a challenging but a very exciting, hopeful school year ahead of us. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Seifert. We'll move to item 3.04, board communications. Leslie?
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I just wanted to report that the board received 51 emails. These were the emails that we received collectively as a board. They were filled with concerns, comments, questions, critiques, and criticism. So they all were received, they all were reviewed, and so I want to report that to those listening.
Thank you for that. And we did our best to acknowledge every one of them as well. So we will now move to item 3.05, audience comments. Dr. Towers.
All regular and special meetings of the board shall be open to the public. Since the board desires to be a good listener and be responsive to the community, persons desiring to address the board may do so during the time so allotted on the agenda and according to established procedures. During the audience portion of each board meeting, patrons are invited by the speaker to speak for or against any proposal on the tentative agenda or on any other school concern. The individual is asked to identify himself or herself, limit comments to a few minutes, and avoid discussing personalities. The president reserves the right to limit the number of presentations and/or length of comments. At the discretion of the president, the patron may be recognized at other times during the board meeting. The board is interested in audience comments. According to the board policy, members cannot respond during the actual meeting. The board will listen to and research all audience comments. If necessary, additional follow-up will occur through district administrators.
All right, thank you, Dr. Towers. So we have a mixture this afternoon or this evening. We have one person in person, and then we have a number that were sent to us to with the request to be read. So we're going to start with our in-person. We don't want to make him wait. So I will invite Mr. Brendan Kearns to the microphone, please.
Good evening, Board of Education, members of Central Office. My name is Brendan Kearns. I'm the president of the St. Charles Education Association. I'm just going to read a statement on the part of our group to everyone for the record. So, members of the board and Central Office, I'm writing on behalf of St. Charles Education Association's executive board and membership. This past week has been a challenging one for many members of the community as the district's all-access plan was debated. We were happy yesterday to be able to sit down with members of Central Office to discuss changes being made. We feel Central Office has done a great job listening to the concerns of our staff, building administration, and the community at large. No plan will satisfy everyone, but we feel the fixes and tweaks presented will go a long way in making our reopening smoother for all parties involved. We thank Central Office for their willingness to listen and adjust the plan and look forward to being back with our students soon. Sincerely, Brendan Kearns, President, SCEA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I do want to thank everybody involved in those discussions for sitting down and having the discussion. So thank you all. You know, there's a lot to read here, so I am going to remove my mask for this. So Leslie and I are going to go back and forth with the additional audience comments. I'll go ahead and start. The first one comes from Rachel Brown, and it says, "Good morning. I'm addressing this issue as a teacher, but my children are also students in the SCSD, which poses even more concerns from a parent's perspective. While I'm not a classroom teacher, I'm concerned about the district's reopening plan for several reasons. At the elementary level, we have just taken 25% of the time away from our computer technology lessons at this critical time, and I think now more than ever, technology learning is vital. Technology piece alone has been a huge learning curve for teachers and students alike. Lots of extra time is going to be required to maintain the technology part that is required for the new and in-person virtual plan. Extra plan time is not available for teachers to maintain both in-person and virtual learning. Also, there is one technology person on staff in the building. Some buildings only have one part-time person. Surely there will be many glitches for both teachers who are technology experts and those who are not. I'm not sure how these can be addressed in a seamless and timely fashion so every child is able to connect virtually and for the teachers to connect with them on a personal level, both in person and virtually at the same time. I also believe it's asking staff to take on even more work in a very uncertain and trying time as it is. Anxiety and concern is extremely high already. Added stress will not help anyone's mental, social, or emotional health and will likely lower immune systems, making staff more susceptible. In addition, there is no mention of compensation for extra work and no time built in to allow teachers to complete extra work. In addition, I am very concerned that teachers were not a part of the decision-making of this plan. It seemed very surprising, and even administration was caught off guard. Classrooms look very different from early childhood through high school, and so do the courses referred to in the plan. We are not a one-size-fits-all. I see 550 plus students a week at 2 different schools. Weekly communication with families and documentation of the communication for this many students, as now required in the plan for all teachers and all courses, is an unrealistic expectation for 31 sections of classes per week. I realize the plan creators visit classrooms often, but it would seem to me feedback from the very people this will have the greatest impact on is something that would have been valuable in creating this plan. I know when we were virtual in the spring, I worked much longer hours than I feel that I ever have during in-person schooling. I needed to allow flexibility for parents who are working at home themselves and the ones who have multiple children. Some parents are working and need more flexible schedules, but it seems if they choose virtual learning, there is now a penalty and no flexibility for that. This plan was built on the assumption that everyone is available to be at computer during normal school day hours. The experience our parents had in the spring was far more flexible, that they may have made a choice on that. I don't think this is fair for them or anyone really. Other neighboring districts are using their own staff to become virtual teachers, to build strong relationships with students virtually, and to be more attentive to their students' needs. Some districts are also paying around $2,000 per student to outsource to Springfield Public Schools. Why are we the only district expecting our teachers to do both in-person and virtual at the same time without compensation? Why does Dr. Seifer claim there are no other options? Why was staff blindsided by this when we're initially asked by HR to fill out a request to teach only virtually in an email? If roughly 1/3 of our students are wanting virtual learning, then why were we not use designated staff for that? For example, if there are 4 second grade teachers, pull one of them to teach the 30% virtual only students per school, while allowing the other 3 to divide up students into small classes for in-person only learning. There are many other sensible solutions to the plan that would make the process more feasible for students, staff, and families. Please take the time to hear us and explore other options. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, 2 is MSTA/SCCTA Executive Committee. The local chapter of the Missouri State Teachers Association would like to thank the building administrators, CO team, staff, and SCEA leadership for working together and listening to the concerns from staff and families. MSTA advocates for and empowers educators so they can teach. We thank you for revising the reentry plan in a way that empowers the teachers of the St. Charles School District. Respectfully, the MSTA/SCCTA Executive Committee, James Peters, Tina Lauer, Alicia Harrison, and Lauren Mertz.
And we'll go to the attachments last. Alex Hansen, hi, I'm a parent of a first grader at Harris Elementary who will be attending classes in person. I have a question I'm hoping the school board can address at the next meeting. In the reentry plan, could the school district outline what specific metrics will be used to determine if the district will switch from base plan to alternate plan A and B. I've seen these metrics provided in other school district reentry plans, and I would like to be in the loop on our district's metrics so that as I monitor our area's metrics, I'll be prepared if things change and we go on one of the alternate plans. My goal in having this information is to not be caught off guard if the school needs to implement an alternative plan. Having this information published also assures me that the district already has these metrics in place. Thank you, Alex Hansen.
Okay, next is from Sarah Carter. Does the sentiment of making expectations based on a child's specific needs change in this plan, whether moving into or out of virtual learning? What happens when a student needs to move between virtual and in-person or vice versa in the new plan? Logistically, how will this be handled? Specifically for elementary grade levels, if we have decided virtual teachers, virtual teachers will have the ratio of students of virtual teachers to be similar to in-person. I feel like will steps be taken to ensure virtual teachers have adequate internet and other technological capabilities if teaching from home? Thanks so much, Sarah Carter.
Next is Erica Vickers. Can we have clarification, explanation for teaching on snow days? Are our students supposed to pack everything they would need every night for the possibility of snow closure? What if they don't have technology at home and forget their Chromebook? What if a teacher leaves things at school? I feel as though children have been through enough change and taking what would normally be a fun day of playing in the snow to now sitting and learning all day. My 6-year-old daughter said, "Where's all the fun?" It would be more beneficial for the snow days to be used as a teacher work day for us to complete the needed paperwork for prep materials. I feel this would be a better use of a snow day because most likely student participation and attendance on a snow day would be low. Thank you for listening to my concern, teacher and parent in the district.
Okay, next is Kellery Anders. Board members and central office team. My name is Kellery Anders. I am the librarian at Coverdale Elementary and part of the St. Charles Education Association Executive Board. As we all know, it has been a tumultuous week in our school district. I want to thank the board members for listening to staff concerns that were voiced in various ways. Some members of the SCEA Executive Board met with Dr. Seifert and his administrators yesterday afternoon, and I am hopeful it was the beginning of rebuilding our relationship. I am appreciative that all participants spoke frankly and listened. I believe the amended reentry plan that will be voted move forward to preparing for your school year. Thanks for listening, Kellery. I want to apologize. This print is so small.
I know.
So if I'm butchering any of your words that are listening, I so apologize.
Next is from Rebecca Goveia. I apologize if I mispronounced the last name. Good morning. I wanted to drop a line to ask about special education for virtual students. I know there are students besides mine who may be susceptible to getting COVID. What are the specific plans to assist those children with virtual learning? Are there paras to assist them daily, etc.? My daughter will be an 8th grader this school year. She had her best grades ever in her first semester at Hardin. The spring virtual learning really affected her grades. I'm worried about her and other kids like her who will need special planning to learn. I know I'm not the only parent with a SPED student who is immune compromised or vulnerable. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, next is Jason Gibbs. I have 2 high school students, and these questions are aimed primarily at that age group. 1, will parents be notified in the event of any positive cases at a particular school? 2, what are the ramifications, if any, to a student that refuses to wear a mask for whatever reason? 3, if students claim they have a medical reason for not wearing a mask, are they required to produce a doctor's note? 4, are the classrooms being altered to keep students at least 6 feet apart where possible? 5, are group labs being altered to reduce proximity to staff and other students? I realize this will likely go over 3 minutes, so I have asked the questions in order of importance from my standpoint. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or need clarification on anything. Thank you, Jason Gibbs.
And I guess I'll take the moment to clarify that we cannot answer these questions in the open session, but as Dr. Towers said earlier, the administration will be able to answer these questions. Next one is from Michael and Tricia Armstrong. Nothing is easy about the situation we are in or the decisions to be made. We acknowledge that this is a complicated and difficult problem to solve. No matter what changes are made, it will be uncomfortable for all of us, parents, children, and teachers, to adapt. That said, we are extremely disappointed to watch the last board meeting where much of the administration and Board of Education ignored the concerns of teachers and parents, and instead seemed to suggest that the only solution was one that was created quickly, without testing, and without consideration of the needs of either teachers or children. We love our SCSD teachers and trust them to adapt in a way that is positive for our children. When those teachers and staff are voicing concerns about being unable to provide that positive learning structure with your plan, we believe them. In your upcoming decisions, we are asking for the following. 1, you have the support of the teachers who will be working your plan. 2, you take the well-being and workload of the teachers into account when designing a plan. 3, you provide the teachers with professional development for how your system will functionally work in a classroom and not just PD on how to use a webcam. 4, you revisit the special services aspect of your plan, as it seems SPED was lumped in with the rest of the class plans and not given the specific accommodations it needs to be successful. 5, you take the time to acknowledge the questions and concerns of parents. 6, do what is right from a timeline fashion. Do not rush into a decision to get things going when taking a little extra time may mean the difference between a solution that works and one which will cause chaos.
Okay, next is from Lauren Steinhoff. Hello, St. Charles School District board members and administrators. I am one of the many parents who watched last week's board meeting with confusion and dismay. I am glad you are reconsidering your previously approved plan, but are also disheartened by the lack of consideration given to our teachers' concerns presented at that time. I'm unclear as to what was originally driving the decision to approve the plan the teachers were clearly concerned about, but from the outside, it appeared to be a financial decision first and foremost. If that is the case, that's worrisome to say the least. I'd like to thank Ellen Zaire and Lori Gibson, who were also, quote, elected by the people, end quote, for voting against this plan, even when it was clear it would pass. I appreciate your conviction and for lending your voice to many of our concerns. My question, if it has not already been answered, is what options are available for working families in the district? I have an incoming kindergartner who, like most, is equally scared and excited to begin, quote, big school, end quote. If he attends in person, what will happen when he inevitably gets emotional when I leave? My son's grandmother is a respiratory therapist who is actively treating COVID patients, and we are educated enough to know that there is still so much we don't know about the virus, especially in regards to children. It is my understanding that with our concerns, our virtual option consists of 1, my husband or I quitting our jobs to assist our child in receiving his virtual education regular school hours, resulting in a lack of income and potential financial hardship. 2, removing our child from the district completely and homeschooling him so we are able to provide his education during a time that is realistic for most working families, while also understanding that it takes more than a time commitment to be an educator, and we likely will fall short of these qualifications. Is my understanding correct? I know we are not in the minority of families who require 2 incomes and also have safety concerns if our children return to school. If my 5-year-old returns to in-person learning, you will very likely need to help up the, quote, stipend, end quote, for his kindergarten teacher, as he or she will be faced with what I can only describe a, quote, risky feat, end quote, maintaining 6 to 8 hours of mask wearing and social distancing. These decisions are enough to keep parents up at night. No one wants to feel as though they are faced with putting their child in a situation where there are potentially serious health concerns or maintaining their household. I'd like to know what, if any, consideration will be given to a family like ours. Thank you, Lauren Steinhoff.
Next is from Melissa Morgan. Thank you for addressing parents and teachers' concerns by making changes to the reentry plan. Really hard decisions are being made, and we really appreciate your willingness to change. Moving forward, my biggest concern is how the district will determine if students will be in person, hybrid, or virtual settings. The information I have gathered has indicated that the district will be using the guidance of the health department. From my understanding, the health department gives guidance on how to reduce risk exposure and how to respond when people test positive, but they do not give specifics on when it's safe to open schools. Will the district be using data or metrics to determine what phase the district will be in? Will community spread in the St. Charles area be a factor? Will there be a predetermined threshold created before the start of the school year that determines each phase, or will it be decided as it comes up? I truly hope these thresholds are decided before the start of the school year so the St. Charles community does not reap the negative effects of our schools opening. I appreciate your time and hard work. Sincerely, Melissa Morgan.
Okay, next is Maria Dickinson. I have a couple questions regarding this coming school year. One, what is the plan if when school is forced to close due to positive cases? Our family would like our kids to be back in seat. However, we realize this may be short-lived due to the nature of the pandemic. My husband and I both work full-time, and I am physically at home. I will not be able to assist our kids if they're on their Chromebooks during what would normally be their school day. What accommodations can be made for kids doing their schoolwork when the parents are able to assist? Which may be later in the evening. I find it unreasonable to hold a second and fourth grader to the same 6-hour online standard as a middle or high schooler. Is it really considered appropriate for these ages? Why are expectations the same K through 12 when other districts recognize that this is a stretch and planning for more appropriate lessons to fit the ages, i.e. Winsville? Thank you, Maria Dickinson.
Next one is from Adina Cranmer. I have a couple of questions that would like answered if possible about the upcoming school year. We appreciate all you guys are doing to make this new year safe for everyone. With the new proposal, I'm wondering how the students who have to miss class due to possible quarantine will continue their education. Will they be able to join the virtual class, or will their teacher have a virtual option available for them the time they are out? Since the quarantine is not just a day or two, it will have an impact. Also, do we know the maximum class size per person for in-person students? I'm asking about the elementary school classes as well as Jefferson. I see that additional teachers may be hired to help with the class size. I'm curious to know what the expectations are. Appreciate any feedback. Sincerely, Adina Cranmer.
Okay, then I'm going back to the attachments, and this is from, just 1 minute, Dr. Thomas Seiler. As a St. Charles City resident and parent of former students of our district, I am writing about my concerns opening the City of St. Charles School District schools to live instruction. The 7-day running average for COVID-19 cases was running about 5 cases per day until July 14th holiday, when the rate increased to over 100 cases per day. Even back in April, when we had most of our deaths and hospitalizations, the rate was only running around 25. Cases have been slowly dropping over the last week, but still remain at much higher rates than in the spring. There also is a problem getting timely testing performed, and some tests are taking over a week to return. We have the Labor Day holiday coming up, and since our last spike was associated with the holiday, we may see another spike after the weekend. Schools in other parts of the country are seeing cases after opening. If you have a case, proper contact tracing in a school setting will be very difficult, and anyone considered to be at high-risk contact will have to quarantine for 2 weeks, even if the contact has a negative test, as the test could still turn positive at a later date. Given these facts, I think the likelihood of this being successful at this time is small, and you will be putting not only children at risk, but staff as well as the families and children. My daughter-in-law, Erica Seiler, teaches at Hardin, and I think she has very valid concerns about returning to the classroom given the prevalence of the virus in the community. I would encourage the district to consider all virtual instruction for the start of the year until the community case rate has flattened and stays down. I fortunately not had any deaths in my existing patients, but I have had one who was on a ventilator for 6 weeks. My partner has had deaths in the hospital. This is not a situation to be taken lightly. Sincerely, Thomas Seiler, MD.
And we have one final one from, oh, I am on the wrong window, from Ashley Martin. Get up to the top. Dear members of the board, I've been a teacher in the St. Charles School District for over 10 years. I've worked in multiple buildings across multiple age groups and even a variety of subjects. I believe I know many educators in this district well, and I feel I can make the following statements about our educators with some confidence. Based on the comments and questions during the August 6th board meeting, it seemed like many members of the board have made their decision based on inaccurate information. Hopefully, the board will have a chance to read the comments of the over 800 parents, staff, and teachers viewing the Facebook Live, and more once it's posted to YouTube, and hear the comments today, as that will clarify the issues teachers, with many parents agreeing, have with the current plan. Teachers are not, as Dr. Malone put it, scared of technology or flummoxed by the use of a webcam. When the district shut down at 5:30 p.m. on a Sunday night, every teacher had to learn how to be online teacher, and we did. No one quit, no one refused. We stepped up and made it work because it needed to be done. We know how to teach in person. We learned how to teach online. We know we can do both jobs. The problem is that it is impossible to do them simultaneously. Not a single administrator or the central office team or board member was able to articulate how this can be done. We did receive professional development for online teaching, but nothing on how to engage online and in-person students at the same time. No other district in the area is doing this. Upon doing research, every mention of a blended model for learning outlined how to provide the best experience for online learners, not how to engage two separate groups at the same time, and no clarification has been provided. Number two, teachers were led to believe that there would be in-person teaching and online teaching done separately. That was the information we had per mailed updates and CO's presented timeline during the August 6th meeting for months. The shock that this plan had been changed and no input from either teachers or parents was requested has led to outrage and backlash you are receiving now, not an unwillingness by teachers to learn how to use a webcam. Per Dr. Tormala's timeline, the CO team started researching webcams July 21st, but did not share the plan with teachers until August 4th and parents until August 6th. Shutting stakeholders out of the process was not strong leadership. It was a missed opportunity to head off the problems we have now when we're desperately short on time. Questions could have been raised, different plans could have been considered, research beyond financial could have been done when there was time to do them. Not only were questions about how logistically we can offer quality education to online and in-person students simultaneously not answered, but some other essential questions from the SCEA presentation and the questions parents and teachers had in the comment section during the August 6th board meeting were not addressed. What plan is there for daily cleaning? How are teachers able to wipe down the room, set up the webcam for the next class, and monitor the hallways for students to have their masks on and stay 3 or 6 feet apart from each other? Teachers are supposed to meet individually and in small groups with online learners to check in. When is this supposed to happen? Even if we wanted to do it during our plan time, those kids are in other classes. Ms. Zer's excellent question, how bad does it need to get before we go online? What is the plan for transitioning online? Several members of the administrations have expressed to teachers in emails and phone conversations that it is very likely will end up being online, and yet Dr. Seifert has said in answer to question August 6th that there is, as of now, no plan for transitioning online. We understand there's no perfect solution. We all know that in-person education is superior to online education for many students. I hope everyone understands that teachers want nothing more than to be with their students again in the classroom, but that pales in comparison to keeping our children and staff safe. During the August 6th meeting, we heard a great deal about the paid online platforms that were rejected for being too expensive, though one parent pointedly commented, is $8 million worth one life. But if were any of the following plans that are being used in the St. Louis area schools and other communities across the country being considered? Begin online and have in-person back to school date in a month or possible end of quarter when it's safe. Begin with the hybrid 2 days in person, 3 days online, and phase back to all in person if it is safe. Have teachers teach part of the day in person, part of the day online. Have students return in person every other day so the teachers can teach online students on the off days. Allow immunocompromised teachers to teach from home with a sub, aide, or administrator in the classroom. From the CO presentation, it doesn't sound like there were enough meetings or enough voices in the room to find the best solution, only the most expedient one. Teachers are being asked to look at teaching in a different way, to adapt, get creative, learn new methods, so why couldn't the CO team do the same? And now we will never know because we are in too much of a time crunch to come up with a better solution. I always believe in coming to an issue with not just problems, but solutions and as well, and here's a suggestion. Start the school year for everyone online for at least 1 month. We know how to do this. We did it in the spring. We will need administration to make it very clear to students and their parents that they will be in front of their computers for significantly longer than we asked them in the spring, that online attendance is mandatory. Allow students whose parents absolutely cannot provide adult supervision or technology requirements for online learning, not those who prefer in-person, those one who demonstrate they can't provide those requirements, i.e. students on free reduced lunch who can't be provided a hotspot, and parents who have a document from their employer saying they are not able to stay home with their child. I think that if documentation were required, employers made aware of the situation might be more open to working with their employees on flexible schedules. The much smaller number of students in the school building can be distanced and supervised either by staff members who volunteer, are not forced, and or administration. As the emails keep saying, these are unprecedented times, so it's all hands on deck because the priority of our students and everyone in a teaching position or higher is a certified teacher who can help. That gives us 1.5 months before students potentially come back in person. During that time, solicit plans, not just comments or questions, but actual plans. It's fair to ask people unhappy with the plan to come up with an alternative from teachers, staff, and parents. It is free to ask, and you will find that people will read research, think through scenarios, and come up with solutions you didn't even think were possible if you just ask. Narrow the plans down to the top 3, and then put a vote to parents and teachers. With good communication via email and social media, this part can be done in a matter of weeks. The buildings have another month to figure out how to make the plan work with their specific population, with the admin and teachers working together. Yes, all of this should have been done in June or July, and yes, it will be done while we're trying to teach students, but the plan will have much more support because parents and teachers were able to make their voices heard. When people feel ownership in a situation, they're more willing to do what is needed to make it work. Together we can and will find a plan that cares for our students and staff by providing them a safe place to learn and work. The only way to make schools safe is to have a safe community, and right now the virus has made our community unsafe. We must make sure our children are. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. We will now move to item 3.06. May I have a motion to amend or adopt the agenda, please?
I move we adopt the agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 4.01, consent agenda. For efficiency, the school board utilizes a consent agenda. Items placed on the consent agenda are routine in nature or are among the many decisions that the board has already determined are in the domain of the administration. May I have a motion, please?
I have a quick question about one of the items.
All right, so what you'll do, Ellen, is you will move to remove one of the items from
Okay.
the consent.
I move that we remove item 4.09 from the consent agenda. I have a quick question about it.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we will get to that in a minute, Ellen, but
Okay.
first we will need somebody to make a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 4.09.
I so move. I so move. And you can second it, Marita.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Items removed. So 4.09, Ellen, go ahead.
I just have a quick question about the workforce educator memorandum of understanding. I just want to know a brief description of that. What is that?
We do contracted workforce development for the state of Missouri through Lewis and Clark, through their adult ed programs. And so Cheryl Young, when she was the director of adult ed, started that, and since she's retired, she is continuing to do that work for us, but as a contractor rather than as an employee.
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Yes, and I accidentally exited out of my program. All right. Item number 6.01, re-entry plan. So, well, I will let you. Lori actually asked first to make a comment, so I was going to allow Lori to make hers. And then yes, Marita.
I'm not going to do my whole comment because a lot of things are being answered as we go along. But I just wanted to first thank all the parents and teachers who reached out with concerns to me. You know, I read your emails and I listened to your phone calls, and I will try to represent as many of you as possible when voicing questions and concerns. I also want to thank the CO team for going back to the drawing board and working to revise this plan. I know your job is extremely difficult, and I would not want it, and there is no answer that will please everyone. But when we get, but I know you are going to go into details here. So after that, when we vote, if I have discussions and questions, I will. Okay.
Well, I was just concerned that administratively, don't we have to have a vote on getting rid of the original vote first? So we already voted for a particular plan. So now, do we have to rescind that vote? Or somehow or another revisit it?
No, but if we approve a revised plan, doesn't that override whatever we had?
Okay, okay.
I was muted. I apologize. Any other board comments before I turn it over to Dr. Seifert? All right, go ahead. All right, please, sir.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to take you through, hopefully, we're not going to go quickly, but we want to go through a concise program with you to talk about our revised virtual learning options. I'm going to go ahead and take my mask off so people can hear me clearly. So there is a PowerPoint that I think, Chris, you're going to share with everybody. We had a great work session with our principals this afternoon, and that was also on YouTube, and we had about 200 people watching that or watching it as a recording, and so there's a lot of details that can be caught up on that recording as well. So the first slide, we're going to kind of, each CO team is going to take some spots on this, or some slides on this, because we all have worked tremendously hard of not only putting this presentation together, but the logistics and the details about how we're revising things. So very quickly, just so we know how we transpired since last Thursday, CO team quickly met all day Friday, all day Monday, or Monday morning to set up a process to revise the reentry plan. We met with principals that afternoon. On Monday, had both high school, secondary come in, and then elementary. The principals have been very influential in this process and leading their staff. They reached out to their staff to collaborate and discuss revised options. The staff really gave some really good feedback, and we talked about the specific plans and also the revised plans and the options, so everybody would have an understanding where we're headed. And we got a consensus from each school then of kind of what their thoughts are to move forward. And then, of course, the principals came back and we had that conversation. We extended the deadline for parents to give their learning choice till tomorrow, and I just want to give a quick update that we still have a little over 1,800 students that need to put their choice in. I know we gave till tomorrow, so please make sure you do that, because everything is based on the numbers of how you're signing up for enrollment and how you're signing up for learning. And we know that you have till tomorrow, and we understand why, but just make sure you get your choice in. We do have numbers here, and very quickly to talk to you about what we have so far. And then the important piece too is the SCA leadership came in. We worked for about 4.5 hours yesterday. Thank you again to Mr. Kearns and his team. And we are united together moving forward, and we're really excited about that. Communication, we talked about this a little bit already. We obviously heard a lot from our staff, concerns shared from the last meeting. We have been hearing, listening, reading from our staff. Also, we had emails from concerned parents, mostly a lot of the K through 8 families having real concerns about what that all access plan looked like, and we understand that. And we also have some community members that and parents that still want the 100% virtual start, meaning everybody's online because they don't feel like it's unsafe to be here. And I understand that as well for students and staff. And then there's some of the main concerns, managing in person and virtual students simultaneously, so too much on the teacher, we understand that as well. And then the privacy and security for students and staff, we'll try to answer all these questions. And then also the questions that we got tonight that we'll also answer as well. Let me just say this, if we don't get all of the questions answered tonight, I promise you, we are working on a process to get those all answered for our staff and our parents before school starts. And we are, I promise you, we're on that. Just the support of our teachers, just making sure that didn't get lost, that we're not listening, and that, the perception, and sometimes it's perception, and we have to live with it, that, that our teachers need that support, and I want to make sure people know we support our teachers 100%. And we know that we can't do any of our plans without them and our staff. We did get some positive remarks as well from our community members, staff, and parents, so we appreciate that. But even if it was constructive criticism or positives or whatever it was, we took it in, we listened, and we're gonna take it to better our plans. And then obviously the SCA leadership and administration both agree we need to be back in school. And we said that last Thursday. And I'm looking at Mr. Kearns if you can't see him because he's here. And I heard that clearly from you on Thursday in our meeting on Thursday, which is a little different meeting. But I want to say that to me that was a really key point, because we are in a pandemic and people are scared. It's scary right now. But both groups and our whole team understand that we need to serve almost 70% of our kids in person, and that's important. So I appreciate that. Next slide. We'll get into numbers. I think this is Dr. Tormala.
So Chris, if you could show slide 4, thank you. So we have a few slides here just to give you an update on where we are with our parent selection of their final choice so far. All of the data that I'm going to show you right now was pulled today around 11 a.m. And as Dr. Seifert mentioned, families have been given an extension to give us their final choice by tomorrow at 4 p.m. So if anybody's listening and you haven't made that selection, please do so by tomorrow at 4. So the first slide that I have here is really looking at our elementary numbers. And if you look at the last row, as of 11 a.m., we had a little over 1,000 responses, so about 57% of our elementary student body had made their final choice. 704 of those students, or about 66%, wanted in person as of 11 o'clock, and about 33% of those families wanted virtual. And 12 students were going to be withdrawing for one reason or another: homeschooling, moving to a different district, going private parochial, or some other option. Chris, if you can go to the next slide, on slide 5. On this slide, we're looking at the results for Jefferson Intermediate and Hardin Middle School. We had about 63% of our student body represented in these selections, on the final selections. 574, or 62% as of right now, are planning on coming back in person. And as of right now, 38% at that intermediate middle school level are looking at virtual. And we still have 37% of the student body that is unaccounted for. Next slide. On the top portion of this, it's our high school numbers. And so we had about 62% of our high school students accounted for in this data. 66% of them, or 628, are reported that they're coming back in person, and 34% are going to be pursuing virtual options. And then for our district totals, as of 11 o'clock, we had just under 3,000 students reporting, 61% of our student body. 1,900 roughly students were coming back in person, so that's 65%. And our virtual total is 35%. And then we still had nearly 40% of our student body unaccounted for. So if everybody can make those selections by tomorrow, that would be fantastic. Now we're going to transition into talking about the revisions that we are bringing forward for the different levels. And so from all of the different correspondence we received, talking with principals, and trying to come up with good plans to try to meet the needs, we are working very, very hard to try to make separate virtual teachers at the elementary level separate from the in-person teachers. The vast majority of the parents that we heard from, a lot of them were from the elementary or intermediate levels, middle school levels, and obviously it's an issue at the elementary level of really wanting to be able to provide those in-person learning opportunities that are separate from a virtual teacher. And so this does give us some great pros. It does give us an option to work with our immune-compromised teachers to give them an opportunity to teach virtual classes. Obviously, our teachers could focus on either teaching virtual students or teaching in person, so that's a really nice thing. And that in this model, it will allow for more asynchronous learning opportunities, which we did hear from some of our working parents that that's something that's important to them. Some of the cons are, though, that as compared to the all-access plan, this increases the in-person class sizes, and we are working really hard to try to address some of that. And it doesn't allow for the flexible transition of students through the different COVID related absences. So we're also trying to work through those issues. We also anticipate that in January, there may be scheduling difficulties if many of our students that are currently in the virtual setting decide to come back to the in-person setting. So it may mean that we have to look at class lists at the elementary level and redistribute students to classroom teachers to make sure that our classrooms stay well balanced and that we have the appropriate amount of staff to be able to address the educational needs. So what are we working on? We're working on a lot of things, but we are, Dr. Lewis is going to talk to us a little bit about staffing here in just a second, and basically we are looking at ways where we can get all hands on deck. I think we've heard that phrase a few times this evening already. And so we are even looking at other positions that are already established within our district that are non-teaching positions, non-classroom positions, to see if it is feasible or warranted to actually change their placement for this year so that we can have more teachers in the classrooms to help reduce down those in-person numbers. So we're going to continue those conversations over the next few days, and Rodney's also going to talk a little bit, think about his staffing conversations and where we are right now with staffing.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Tomla. I think K through 4, I had a wonderful opportunity to sit down with our principals and discuss our options. So from K through 4, here's where we are. We will be able to move forward with a virtual and in person. So that's really important. So we'll be able to do that. I think that attempting to have all of our virtual teachers come from within the school is very beneficial because it's the closest thing that we can bring forward that allows the transition for virtual and coming back out of virtual. So we think that's a huge benefit. Plus, those teachers stay with their community and students that they've served throughout their career. Obviously, looking at the class sizes will be very, it'll be something that we're looking at closely. Obviously, if you take a staff member from within the school, have them teach virtually, and then you reshuffle the deck, if you will, and put them back into those remaining in-person teacher classes, it could get higher. In some situations and in some schools, it works really well. In some, it does elevate the class size. So it's something that we're looking at. I think, as Dr. Tomlin stated earlier, we will look from within before hiring out for new positions. Very, very important that we utilize the staff that we have before we move forward in adding additional staff to the budget.
Can we clarify something? And
Yes.
I'm going to try to, sorry, I'll make sure everybody can hear me. I took some notes to some of the comments tonight as well, because I want to make sure we answer. I said we're probably not going to answer all the questions that people have, because there's a lot, but I want to make sure we get some things. So we talk very quickly about what class sizes actually look like.
Sure.
So what virtual, and not versus, but what in person, and what are we trying to do in terms of the numbers very quickly?
Good question. So our City of St. Charles School District standard K through 2 is 17 to 20. 3 through 4, 20 to 23. For our virtual, we've taken a different approach, is that we'll use the DESE max, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education max. Those numbers are K through 2, 25, 3 through 4, 27, 5 through 6, 30. Now, I will tell you that some may be wondering, well, why such a huge change? One is the philosophy that online, and I actually had this conversation, but online is different than being in person. An in-person teacher will work with a variety of circumstances around him or her, such as students coming into the classroom, sitting down, taking attendance, but it'll look different virtually. Picking up kids from, if you're at the elementary level, you're transferring the student from PE to art, et cetera, coming in from lunch, all of those various things. And even at the secondary level, switching classes, all of those things that take time that, to be very honest, when you're thinking about a day, we don't really account for those times. So we know that our virtual teacher won't have those small transitional pieces as an in-person teacher. Now, I wrote in my notes here, nothing's perfect, okay? Nothing's perfect. What we're trying to do is be responsible toward the budget and at the same time be fair to in-person teachers as well as virtual teachers.
I think there's a question.
Yes.
Because I just want to be clear on this one. I notice on a con, it says it does not allow for flexible transition, and yet we did talk about how it does allow for an in-person student who may be quarantined for a few days or 14 days. It does allow for them to continue education and easily transfer back in. I just want.
What I can say is that the workaround that we have in place for this does provide education to continue. It will not be seamless. It will not it won't have that live streaming where the student is interacting with the classroom and the teacher. What we're talking about doing is having our virtual teachers, obviously they're creating virtual content, and having them share that with their in-person counterparts on their grade level or their department. So that if in-person teachers have students that go out for long-term quarantine or for other reasons, then they do have virtual content that they can share out with those students. The in-person teacher will monitor their students just like they would if they were out for a long-term illness in the past. But that interaction looks different in this model. But it definitely, we are working with it to make sure that there is continuing of learning for those students. It just will not be seamless like the previous plan.
Yeah, this This is in comparison to All Access, and I do think that was the most seamless one. Two, I agree with Dr. Twombly in terms of it's a workaround, okay? Three is that we also have to understand that not all of our students will be educated by the teacher in their school. It's very possible that I could be teaching virtual and I can take a small portion of my students at Lincoln, but I could also have a portion of my students at Coverdale. Okay, well, we'll make it as flexible and as seamless as possible. It will not be as smooth, and we'll have to work with some of those small nuances.
And the other nuance, and I just want to make sure that possibly a virtual teacher could be teaching two grade levels.
Yes, I thank you for bringing
just
that
wanna
up,
make
and that
sure.
also brings that up. So if I'm third grade, I could be teaching a small portion of third grade and a small portion of fourth
Online.
grade. Mm-hmm.
Online.
So then the next question, and I don't want to get too weedy, but I think I really want to make sure I answer some questions that I know that are out there. So if a child comes back, because we're saying they're going to give us a commitment for a semester, so when they come back in January and say they want to come back to the classroom, they go back to one of those classrooms that is already as an in-person class,
that
correct?
is correct,
But we have to
yes.
watch what numbers look like.
And that is also another thing that we have to consider and that we're working on. So if we're back in January for some reason that we've been out for virtual, then depending on the numbers, which classes we put them in, et cetera. But yes, the goal is to put them in the second grade class that they were originally assigned to.
And yes, we have worked with our teachers who have medical issues or immunocompromised, and we're hoping they're becoming our virtual teachers.
Yes,
Okay.
what we've done is that anyone that has submitted a doctor's note in which I've communicated with the doctor, that's immune compromising. So in my HR world, so it doesn't mean that we don't have other health issues, but when we're talking about immune compromise, it's been validated by their physician. Okay, so like Dr. Seifert said, we've placed the majority of them, not all of them, but the majority of them.
Thanks, Dr. Lewis. Ready for the next slide?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So Jefferson, I had a wonderful conversation with Jefferson today. So we will again separate virtual and in person, and so we know a option, a pro of that is the option for immune compromised teachers. And like I said, we've placed the majority of them. Teachers can focus on the virtual and in-person option. We'll allow more asynchronous learning opportunities. We know a con is the increase in person class sizes. I will say that when I did a numbers crunch to date, and I told you this earlier, is that I don't think going from 16 sections to 12, but with the amount of students coming out with the data that I had, and the data that I had was early, is that we'll keep a class size around 22 and a half for both. Now, I will also say, while I told you the DESI max was 30 for 3 through 4, I put the number at 25. The reason being because the way Jefferson is set up, you have to have an even number of staff because they have to be able to bounce between ELA and math. Okay, so you can't have an odd number. It doesn't work for them. So we have 4 teachers for both. That brings your virtual staff down to 4 in 5th and 6th, so a total of 8 virtual teachers, and now you have 12 in-person teachers for both. So we like the class sizes, and Mr. Shields was really excited about that number. 22 and a half is a relatively good number. We also have staff, just quickly, we also have staff that at this point, they're interested in teaching virtual, so that's also a good thing. So another con is does not allow for flexible transition. It's the same thing here, Dr. Tarver, same thing. January obviously can be extremely challenging. Things we're working on: identifying a virtual team, creating a virtual team. We're right there. I want to confirm tomorrow, but I think we're there. One of the huge areas we're working on are the music options. They have band, they have instrumental, and they have vocal, and so this might be all access, as we'll talk about with Hardin, because it's going to be really hard to have a band option virtually. Okay, that'll just be challenging. But we want to allow our students to experience that if possible. Vocal, the same thing, okay? And obviously the expectations for virtual teachers, you know, and obviously we're gonna look at class sizes because my data to get to that 22 and a half for early numbers, we're still waiting on new numbers.
We also have some specifics on that expectation for the virtual learning, or as Dr. Malone would like to say, the online learning, and that can be during this time, or if we go to full virtual, full online, and we have that on a slide later on, so we'll have that conversation. Anything else with Jefferson, Dr. Lewis?
No, that's it.
I'd like to ask a question, please. Could you explain the concern about dignity of students with the video conferencing, the electives that you might offer here?
Sure, I can help answer that. So with the live streaming, the setup that we have currently is the teacher would have their instructional area in the classroom. So if just to use kind of a standard classroom, the front of the classroom, they'd probably have a whiteboard where they have a projector. The teacher would kind of use that as a home base for instruction, demonstrations, those types of things. So we envision that the first desk in front of that area in the center would be your webcam station. So the webcam will also have a mini tripod that can be adjusted for tilting or height. And then that would be focused on the screen or the whiteboard. And then you would also, all of that would be run through Zoom. So if the teacher did have a presentation or was showing his or her screen for the students for any reason, that would also show up for the students at home. So the intent behind that is that the students actually in the classroom aren't on the camera. So in most situations. So that's how we would kind of go about it. The webcam itself does have a really nice visual of whatever it's shooting, and it also has enhanced audio. So if there is a conversation happening between the teacher and the students, a dialogue around the content that they're talking about, students at home would be able to pick that up. Whereas if we were just doing a normal Zoom, it might pick up what I'm saying, but not what you're saying across the room. So those capabilities are in the technology that we have. When we're talking about FERPA, like the educational right law or privacy and those types of things, we have vetted all of this through our district attorneys. So FERPA is all around educational records. So live streaming a classroom would not be a violation of that. A violation of that would be if we are using anything to like display student grades or individually identifiable health records or discipline records or disability status. Those types of things would be FERPA issues. And we wouldn't do that in the regular classroom anyway. We wouldn't call out any of those things. In terms of privacy, this also goes to, we do live stream activities that are related to schools on a regular basis, like different assemblies, the football games, sporting events, where students are interacting and students are performing. And so the conversation around the classroom is that there's not an expectation of privacy like it would in other specific spaces like locker rooms, changing areas, things like that. So that's the conversation and the advice that we've received from our attorneys. However, we are trying to also give parameters to teachers so that when we're setting up our web cameras, it is giving more privacy to our students so students aren't being streamed on the camera as well. Does that help answer your question?
Yes. So does that mean that a student, you know, is sitting at home and all he or she sees is basically the teacher and the board? Does that student also then hear other students?
Well, if there's conversation in the classroom between the teacher and the students and we're asking questions, yes. Okay. The other piece I don't know that I mentioned when I was saying this, when we have the webcam set up, teachers are also receiving another monitor that's going to be right there. So if they are teaching from that space, they're going to have a monitor that's going to show all of the students at home that are logged in through Zoom. So that teacher will be able to hear those students. The teacher will be able to see the chat box from those students. So if there are questions or if the teacher wants to call on Leslie in person, but wants to call on Ellen virtually, the teacher has the ability to do that and engage students through that process. So the students at home aren't just watching silently, they do have the opportunity to engage in the conversation, engage in the learning activities, and the teacher has the same opportunity to engage them as well.
To clarify, this is not an issue for K through 4.
Correct.
It only could possibly become an issue at Jefferson.
For music
And,
classes
yeah,
only.
For the music classes. And it is definitely an issue at Hardin and the high school.
Yes.
But also Hardin, we'll just talk about just a second, that is just some elective classes, Ellen, at Hardin too, so it's not the full access plan at Hardin either.
So to be clear, let's say a child has some type of medical issues or is struggling, behaviorally, okay? And a parent is sitting right there next to that child. And then other parents are listening, with their parent. Is there a concern there at all?
So what we would do in that situation is basically make a modification for the virtual environment. So let me give you an example. A child has a seizure at school. So out of privacy for that child, we will close doors. We usually will get children out of the area. We give that child privacy. So if something similar happened in the classroom here, that's where we turn off the audio and video on the camera as well. So that's also, it's the digital equivalent of us closing the door, giving privacy, those types of things. It's just the accommodation for having a digital environment.
The all-access classes, are they recorded?
So the idea is that, yes, we would like them to be recorded to give some of those asynchronous opportunities whenever we can. And so with all of this, it is protected within the Google Classroom. So students have to have access to that Google Classroom. Teachers have given them that kind of access. And then to make, to be a part of any of the Zooms or anything like that, they will be password protected by the teacher. And then they will also have the waiting room enabled so that students have to first have the password and then go to the waiting room and then the teacher lets them in. So those are the steps around trying to protect and make sure
So to be direct, my question is, I've seen in several emails, and I don't know if they were directly to the board or to me, but if a parent says, I want to do virtual, but I refuse to have my child recorded, what does that look like?
Well, so if they want to be virtual, but they don't want to be recorded?
Yes.
So when you're on Zoom, just like we've all done, like you turn off your video.
But I mean, I guess I'm asking, is the teacher recording the class?
The teacher, for the virtual options, whenever we have those opportunities, we would
Okay.
record, because the nature of trying to create a virtual environment is that you have, if you are not there in person, then you have access to that learning later on.
But neither, I don't know if I'm helping, but neither the in-person student or the online student
Is being
face will be
recorded.
on there.
Right, just the instruction?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Now, audio, I mean, if they're talking.
Yes.
But nothing in terms of their image or their face.
Maybe that could be part of our communication
And
going
that,
out.
I think that's,
Yeah.
I was trying to help because I thought that's where
Yeah.
we're going. So,
Yeah.
so both sides are protected with how we're doing specifically with the cameras. And you heard Mr. Walker today early on in our work session. They've tried it out. We're gonna do a lot of that mock setup for. And one thing I've heard, and so he was the online student. He couldn't see anybody. They couldn't see him. But thank you, Dr. Malone. I took my mask off. So they've already mocked that up and looking at that, and they can't see each other. And then what teachers are finding out too is Johnny's in the front row, or quickly he's at that camera maybe quicker than the teacher can, and maybe that's a job that they can do very quickly if it needs to be turned off.
So far, from our K through 8, primarily, we will have separate teachers doing in-person instruction. And those teachers who are doing virtual instruction we'll be doing so that the lessons are recorded, so that, because some parents said, I don't expect my child to sit at home for 6 straight hours, so they have that asynchronization opportunity, because this is truly virtual. But starting at Hardin, and then with elective classes, those virtual classes will be the all-access plan. So those students who are doing choir or whatever that elective is, they have to be there at 2 in the afternoon, ready for that class. And they will know that schedule.
Yes, and so I need to be very clear about our virtual options at elementary and on up. Students are expected to be live with their teacher on a schedule.
Right, so they can
It does not mean that they're online for 6 straight hours. That's not the case. But if you think about the elementary schedule, if they have reading at 9 o'clock, the students would get on with their teacher, they would have instruction, and then they would have time to go do whatever the independent work is. So while it's independent work time, they don't have to be on the screen. But then at 10 o'clock, if we're doing math, they would come back for that instruction and then do their independent work on their own. So their expectation, that expectation is there. But when we have the opportunity for teachers to be a true 100% virtual teacher, that teacher then has more flexibility to work with families when they have unique situations. So if we have a young child who doesn't have the ability to have a caregiver there to help keep them on or whatever, we can make some accommodations for families. If we're recording those items, then those would be available for families to access later that day, later in the evening if that's the case. In most cases, when teachers are working through this process with students, they would hop on, they'd have their instruction at the different times, and then parents who are working during the day and need to help students complete the work and complete the independent projects in the afternoon or evening, then they would have some flexibility to do that as well. So the live instruction would be kind of sprinkled throughout the day on a set schedule. Right. It's not just kind of here and there and whenever, and parents kind of have to figure that piece out. It should be a set schedule when it's very clear to everybody when those lessons are going to occur. And then there will be also times for individual check-ins with those students where they would be one-on-one with the teacher's checking in on them. It might be some small group reading groups where the teacher's giving differentiated instruction based upon the instructional levels of the students. So it will look a little different. When you get to Jefferson, we potentially, it's not fully settled yet on the music classes, if those will be all access or if they may just only have one option like general music and not be able to have the others, which I think that might be a concern for families, so it probably will wind up being all access for the music. And then when you get to Hardin, they have a team that they're working on creating that will be virtual only for English language arts, math, science, social studies, health and PE, computers. Beyond that scope, then all of the electives would be all access. And I'm including an elective would be a different change in math other than just Math 7 or Math 8. So if you've selected to go into pre-algebra, if you've selected to go into algebra, if you've selected to go into foreign language, which is a high school course also, or any of your electives, then those would all be all access. Because one of the things that we have to understand is that at the middle school level, we have 100 different courses in our course enrollment book for grades 7 and 8 combined. In order for us to be able to provide that level of opportunity for students to choose what they're interested in or choose what they're taking, there's really no way we would be able to offer all of those in a virtual format with virtual only teachers. So the only way that we continue to allow students to have choice is to go through the all access process. Otherwise, they would have a very, very limited list of courses that they would be taking.
Can I jump in and
Sure.
go back about probably 4 minutes? When we were saying if parents need accommodations, like, like the situation we have where there are 2 working parents and who do they contact?
Their teacher.
They contact their direct teacher So.
They would work through that process.
Okay.
I
I
mean-
feel like if we have people watching at home, if we could answer specifically, instead of generalities, like, we can help you, who can help them?
Right.
So that would be beneficial moving forward with answering some of this, if we could have some direct.
Is this the time, when we're talking about accommodations, will we be addressing special ed later on?
Yes,
Yes.
we have
Okay,
a
it's
slide
coming up.
specific to special ed, yeah.
Okay,
So-
thank you, I'm sorry.
No, you're perfect. So now, we've kind of talked about Hardin, so if we want to transition to the next slide.
Is there any questions on Hardin? Because I don't want to skip on, okay, just making sure.
Oh, I think we do need to make one clarification, that when we're talking about all access teachers, one of the things that we have discussed and have decided upon is that since we are asking our all access teachers to manage both the students that are in person and are at home, and we know that we're roughly sitting around that 32% mark-ish, give or take a little bit, of those students, the analogy I used, or the example I used earlier was if your class size is approximately 22 in a normal classroom and about 32% of those kids are at home, that means 7 of your kids are at home, then your in-person class size is 15, as an example. So they don't have necessarily more students than they typically would, but they're in 2 different settings. So that is something to manage. And so in order to help with that, we are giving teachers who are all access teachers, so they are teaching in that simultaneous situation, a stipend, and that stipend will be for the semester. So, and it will be for $500 per semester. So if they teach all access first semester and second semester, they will get 2 lump sums totaling $1,000. So, and we plan to offer that to any teacher who's teaching all access.
And there was a question about what does a classroom look like set up? So we are shooting for that 6 feet apart in the classrooms. We really are trying that. But now that we have gone away from all access at K through 8 for the most part, we are committed to our class sizes as staying in our district policy range, but they won't be as low as we thought they were going to be in the all access. Meaning, so we hope to be 6, but we're going to be anywhere from 3 to 6, and that's what our health department said was sustainable and was acceptable. So we're going to spread them out. At the high school level, though, we will do a better job. Kind of depends on what the space of the classroom is. Our classrooms are in different, obviously different sizes. But at the high school level, we feel better about what that looks like because we will be all access, and we might have 3 or 4 or 5, 6 kids less in those classrooms. So I knew that was one of the specific questions I wanted to answer.
Well,
So-
I'm sorry. Well,
I was just going to ask a quick clarification. I don't know if it was us or some other district somewhere in the country, but at one point I thought I heard a recommendation that you have people like in pods. So like if somebody does test positive for COVID, then only the people in the pods would have to be.
So let's talk about that. So, and this is where there's a lot of questions, and we already answered it during the work session, but I want to say it again, so I'll just say it now. When it comes to a positive test, and there's questions on how do we transition to virtual, and there's no plan. There is a plan to this, and it starts with, and you heard our principals talk about it today, it starts with assigned seating. So it's not so much a pod, but it is assigned seating so we know exactly where every kid sits in every class. Within that, so it becomes a pod because if I, we're sitting here and I got somebody before me, after, behind me, in front of me, and to the 2 sides, when we look at tracking, and everybody wants to talk about how bad does it get before we go, what we're going to try to do is prevent the illness from coming in by doing a self-assessment checks, and that's very clear in our plan. When kids are at school and we identify them as symptoms, isolate them as quickly as we can and get them home. And obviously, we talked about disinfecting and sanitizing. So all those preventive measures are taking place. And then if we have a positive test, we go back, and it's going to be the job of our nurses and our administrators combined to look and say, okay, Jimmy sat here, and in each class, there's 4 kids that will be next to him within 6 feet, 15 minutes. At lunch, in the bus, now that gets to be, at the high school level, could be quite a quite a list. But all those kids then are tracked. What happens then is Jimmy or the child that is tested positive, obviously they're working with their PCP, their personal profession, their personal, thank you, doctor, and then, thank you, private, I always say PCP. Okay, thanks. Also, the health department has directed to us, when we have a positive case in our building, we directly report that to them. They will then take over the case and tell that child, that student, or staff member when they can come back. The people who are affected only, that's why you've heard our principals talk about all these assigned seats, because we don't want to have to shut down a whole class or a whole school or a whole district. We hope everybody wants to know when we're going to virtual, and I hope we don't have to. So what that tracking does then, those names go to the health department. They work with those names and those parents and say, you're quarantined and we will tell you when you can come back. We've talked about then when they are quarantined, what does that look like? If they're all access, they're right with their classes. If they have to be at home, then they're for quarantining, then they're getting virtual, online, pre-recorded from the virtual, through their teacher from the virtual teacher. Okay, everybody good with that? So let me just say this. So that's what's happening. It's not really a pod, but and that has to happen. Masks have to happen. And let's say this again. We have to have masks on. If students come to school without a mask on, the administrator will take that situation and we will say, here's a mask, put it on. We're giving face coverings out to all of our students and our staff. We will have disposables to give to them. If that becomes a refusal, that child will go home and we'll look at virtual. If it becomes a refusal on a regular basis, then that's a conversation with that family and that child will probably have to go to virtual. Did you want to comment on that? You look like you're good.
I was just going to ask,
please.
About the mask situation too, but it's going to be mandatory.
The mandatory is there, and we are actually doing K through 12. We heard from early childhood that it's going to be recommended, but a lot of those kiddos will wear it too. Now we're going to work with our little ones, our K and 1 and 2. We know, and there are times where, guys, I'm just telling you, we want our staff, our teachers. We want them to be empowered. If there are times in a classroom when we're 6 feet apart and we want to give a kid a breather or a teacher, we can do that. I'm not saying we're going to be a mask. It's a lot. I have mine off now. I don't know how you feel, but it's a lot to have one on all day long. But in terms of there becomes an issue with refusal or it's a constant issue, then that has to be a conversation with the administrator and with that parent. I will probably be involved or whoever directly supervises from the central office team. And we'll have to have a conversation about maybe this is maybe not in persons where we should be at this point.
And we're going to contact parents. I know we can't give names, but are we going to contact parents?
So if we have a positive test, and we've already done this summer, we have a very low COVID test so far. Of course, we haven't had a lot of kids, but through graduation, and also through our sports, we are letting parents know that are affected by that or in that class. I'm also sending in all staff, I'm looking at Brendan because he's here, but I'm also sending an email out to all staff to let them know we have a positive case. We do not identify that person, but we give enough information so people will know that they don't have to be fearful of it if it's not in their building, and that's how we're doing it.
But
now,
once you said you contact the health department, and they take over.
They have to take ownership of that. And we've actually had an issue today, and health department's great, where we couldn't get through to them on their hotline, and they emailed us right back and said, what's the situation? So that's what's happening. When it comes to this transitioning part, when we're going to go to virtual, and Dr. Seifert talks about, I think we might have to go virtual if we, and let me just say this. Ronnie's doing a heck of a job of figuring out, to pull these teachers out is an unbelievable job. It's a lot going on. We've got to have some positions filled, and everybody's going to say, oh, you're the last second. No, districts who've been working on this for months are still having issues. It's just a hard process. We have staff members that are telling us because of medical reasons they can't come back, or because of their own children's school being shut down, they can't be here for 12 weeks or 10 weeks or be on FMLA. That's a natural thing. That's not that they don't want to be here. It just, so with all that said, we have to have staff to be able to pull this off, and so that could be an issue. So what I'm saying, and I've said all along, we have to be ready to change on a dime and change quickly. I would love to be able to give everybody, hey, this is exactly what it looks like when we go to virtual. I will tell you this, St. Louis County, and it's not good or bad, but St. Louis County use metrics that are about the spread in their community. And that's what their leadership used. Here, we're not doing that. Let's be honest. We're not in our county. So what I am doing as a leader is I'm looking and I'm making sure that I'm defining what it looks like for percentages, and I'm not waiting for people to get COVID, but what percentages does it look like when we then have spread in our buildings? What I'm hearing, what I'm seeing from our health department is 5% in a building. And then there's a 4% and a 3%. It gets a little, but what the state is telling us at the health department level, and a lot of these things change. Now we're down, the symptoms are from 72 hours to 24 hours symptom free, so things are changing. But 5% of the student body, staff body in a building tests positive in one day, 4% of the student body in one building tests positive over 2 days in a row, and then you go to 3% for 3 days in a row. So we'll be watching that. If we do this, and it's a lot, but if we do this the right way and we train and we can track these kids and we can try to keep them together even at lunch. And again, this is no fun. We want kids to be able to interact, but right now we got to do this. We got to have masks on, and we got to know where kids are at. And we got to do the best we can to social distance them. We will track this. If we get to that 5% in a day, we will obviously have to have conversations what that looks like in a building. I'm hoping the way we're doing it, we won't all of a sudden have to say, oh my gosh, our whole school district has to shut down. Now, I know people would love to have a month advance notice. We're not going to have that at this point. And again, I'm not saying right or wrong between the two counties, but we're not getting that direction from our health department. Our health department's doing great things for us. We will talk to them, and they will be a help for us. But right now, we're not going by community spread. We're going about what it looks like in our building, and we're going to go by percentages. And that we will communicate directly with people if we have to go to a virtual setting. But if we do our job, and everybody wears their masks, and we do that properly, and we do everything we're talking about, and we're giving options and choices, and a lot of our kiddos are going to stay home, which is great, but we're going to meet those needs, and then we're going to be able to track. We've got a shot at this.
I will say that, and while I don't think any of us have illusions that this is going to be simple or that there are always risks, but in the cases that I have seen, that I've read about, like when they reopened school in Israel and it was a disaster, and there was an article first thing in the morning on CNN today, the common denominator there was that they didn't hold those protocols true. So like in the Israeli schools, parents complained that their kids were hot, so they said, okay, we'll turn on the air conditioning and take off masks. Well, then they all got it. That's going to be the thing, and I know it's going to be tough. I know it's going to be hard, but that is a major thing.
Well, mitigating works.
Yes, and thank you, Josh. Let me just say this. Sorry, Donna. And I'm not. This is not to be critical of anybody, but majority of what I just said is in our basic plan that we sent out on the 20th. We just don't have time, or we don't want to see this. They're all in there. We have to tweak it. Julie's working with our nurses in the health department because now it's 72 hours down to 24 hours, and we're doing some things. But if we can, and we've said this all along, if we will self-check us in the morning, self-check us when we get there, if we have illness, stay out. If we have illness, isolate quickly and get them out. If we will do our disinfecting, if we will do our cleaning, if we will keep kids as far apart as possible, keep masks on them, give them options, and then be able to track the best we can, we hopefully won't have to shut down because of COVID. If we have to shut down because people are sick because of the flu and different things, and I can't get our staff has to be there. Our staff wants to be at school, and our staff wants to serve. I know that. But let's be honest. You get one symptom and you have to be home till 24, it used to be 72 hours. That doesn't take too long to say we got to take a class or a school to shut down. So again, my point to my people who are listening or watching online, I hope we don't have to shut the whole district down in a day. It might be a school, it might be a class, but we can do that because of the tracking. Go ahead, sorry.
I just wanted to point out, because we're trying to be more specific and clear for parents who've been wanting specifics. If they didn't tune in or hear any of the conversations during the work session, how much specific attention is being given to all, when you talk about keeping kids separated and tracking and all of those things. Specifically, we learned just how detailed every school has addressed our pre-K kids who wouldn't be comfortable maybe wearing a mask. Some of them already are wearing masks. They have plexiglass in place that maybe some parents may not be aware of, and meeting them at the cars rather than coming into the building, so that we don't have a lot of outside access of people coming. You're still welcome to come into the buildings, but it's being kind of limited. So we're kind of keeping our students in a very protected bubble, I hope.
Well, I would recommend if you're listening and you didn't watch it, you should go back and watch. Isn't that video on YouTube?
Yes, it is,
Yeah, and
from
you
today.
should go back and
Yes.
watch it, and you.
A lot of questions.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a lot of criticism of lifting your mask up, taking your mask off. The bottom line is, and when you're close to people, we are pretty much 6 feet now, and you can take your mask off. You have to be careful of that, but we have to train. This is not normal. This is our new way of doing things, and we have to train our teachers and our students to be able to do this properly. And we can do it. I know we can. Medical exemption. There was a question about kids with medical exemptions or sensory issues or different things. That will be worked out through the special ed process, through the IEP process, and we will work with families and students who do have specific medical exemptions or issues with masks. Julie, do you want to add anything to that?
I think, Lori, are you waiting?
Yeah,
I think Lori's been waiting.
I didn't know.
Yeah, oh, it's okay.
I didn't know, sorry. Can I finish?
I was just going to say, yes, if there's an identified disability through a 504 or an IEP, that's something that can be put in as an accommodation in the plan, and possibly students that may not have it identified as a significant impairment, significant need, still having a doctor's note would be something that we could take a look at to make those decisions within the building. But yes, definitely we will work with families of students with disabilities.
Go ahead, Laura.
Lori.
Jason, you had started to talk about this earlier, and I don't know if you got all the way done, but like the self-checking, and this was one of my questions, because last year at the high school, when I was up there for rehearsals constantly, we have overachiever kids that walked around with 103 and 104 temperatures, and you were saying earlier that a lot of those incentives are going to go away this year, so they go home when they're sick.
Yes, that's a great point. So again, tonight you just approved in the consent agenda an addendum to the handbook that simply takes the attendance incentive out of being exempted for finals. Because we have a whole different way of thinking. Yeah, hey, I can tough it up to get to school. I can do that, and believe me, our teachers do it all the time. I hear from teachers all the time, and again, I think people forget, I'm a teacher too. We're teachers too, so, but tell me, Mr. Kearns, when it's easier probably to be at school than to be home, correct, sick? Yeah. Well, exactly. And so that's a whole different mentality, and so we had to change that in our handbook, so that was very important.
Back to our slide presentation, yes, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay.
Keeping you focused.
Now that we're up to 8th grade here, I'd like to ask a couple of questions about, they came from some teachers and so on, but first of all, the technology that we have excellent technology, we have great people that work in technology, but when there is a problem with all access and you can't figure out why you can't connect with somebody, you want to be able to call a technician or somebody and get an answer right now. How is that possible?
We have a technician in every building.
Full-time?
No, not full-time. In our 4 smallest elementary schools, they share a technician. However, we are thinking about adding staff and technology. We have not done that at all yet because we're waiting on what we need to do for certified staff before we determine if we need to add technical staff.
So
I just turned it on.
So you feel comfortable with all this technology and so on like that, that we're going to be
Yes.
using, that teachers and parents and other people will be able to have technical assistance?
Parents will have limited technical assistance. If they've got a device at home, we have the ability to give them some phone advice, but we will not be able to do that any other way unless they bring the device in.
Will we have a hotline?
Yes, absolutely. Every building had the number of their tech out to parents last spring, and that's the way we would continue to work that.
And you feel that the technology people can respond quickly?
Yes.
And they have district-issued cell phones, so the phone number that we have is the cell phone that they have with them at all times.
It's just like anything else. If there is an issue, we will do our best and quickest to fix it. That's in anything.
There will be issues. There's
Sure they
there's
are.
no doubt. But yes, we feel confident that we can address it fairly quickly and efficiently.
Okay, and the other thing that came up is, and maybe that's in your slides, I haven't seen it yet, but how we're going to handle ELL students. I mean, there's concern about, the self-esteem issues and, dropout rates and so on like that. And I was wondering, are you going to address that later?
It's not in Julie's slide, no, but basically, once we have all of the finalized numbers, we will work through our student list to see which students have special education needs, are gifted, or ELL, and receive specialized services. We have ELL teachers that serve each of our schools, and so depending upon how many students and where they're at, we will probably either look at having the ELL teachers that are assigned to the buildings provide those services in a very similar way like special ed will be doing, or if we have enough ELL students that make this choice throughout the district, we have a couple of ELL teachers that have said that they would be willing to go virtual if that justified enough for the staffing for them to do that. So we, that's not fully worked out yet because we don't have all of the data we need in order to make those decisions, but they will continue to receive services.
So you feel comfortable that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We're in high school?
To clarify, we feel comfortable and confident about everything we can do to help our staff and students. But let's make sure we all make this clear. This is going to be a very challenging school year. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're doing new for our staff. There's a lot of new things that we have to, I mean, we are going to do everything we can to make sure that we are giving the best learning opportunity for both kids that are at home and school. But there are going to be issues. There are going to be challenges, but we are going to be on it and working together to figure it out.
No, and I understand that, but I also think that the community needs reassurances.
That was my statement, to reassure them that we are on it. We want to be realistic to what's happening, but we definitely have the ability and the effort and the willingness to make sure this works. So high school. Rodney, do you want to take it from here?
Our high school is a little bit unique in the fact that they're going all access. K through 8, we have virtual teams. We have all access Music Jefferson. And when we get to Hardin, as Dr. Tomlin stated, we have access in potential math classes, electives, and ACT Lab. But when we get to high school, it's a little bit different because it is all access. So one of the pros, able to offer the courses with a virtual option, with the exception of Lewis and Clark CAPS, rec games, clothing, and child development. Those are classes that can be offered virtually. And by the way, we talked about what Lewis and Clark looks like in a full virtual model. Students are able to continue previously selected courses, allows for the flexible learning options due to COVID-related illnesses. This sort of gets back to what Donna stated earlier at the K through 4 level in terms of how you can seamlessly move in and out, but obviously going all access does allow that. Some cons, obviously, you know, some of our high school staff might not like this plan. Obviously, it's a con, and things that we're working on, the expectations, as with all of these plans, K through 12, is just nailing down what it looks like for the virtual teacher. And the stipend for the SCSD all access teachers. So we know that teachers could, you know, obviously view this as doing more, and so we certainly want to show good faith and obviously compensate them for their time. So that's that $500 per semester for teachers that take that all access option.
Does that include, let's say, special ed teachers that are doing all access? So it's all teachers?
Any teacher in the district that is doing all access,
okay.
meaning simultaneously in person and online at the same time, will get a $500 stipend for each semester.
Okay.
And we told our SCA leadership, we felt like that was well deserved, and also hopefully, and I think they took it as a gesture of, we understand that this is going to be, you know, I don't want to say 2 jobs, but obviously some extra work, especially here at the beginning. And I will add this, you know, we said that cons teachers might be upset. I talked to I won't say several, but 3 or 4 or 5 high school teachers today, and I can tell you this, they're ready. They're ready for the challenge. I'm not saying that it's their first choice, some of them. I talked to one teacher today who is a phenomenal teacher in our district, and I respect her fully. And we had a great conversation about the real concerns, but I know that person is going to do everything she can and will do a great job online and in person. And so I know they're up for the challenge. It's going to be challenging, and it's going to be new, and we have to get through that. But once we get into a rhythm, I think it's going to be great, and I know our teachers are ready to go.
All right, so for the special ed service piece here, let me scroll down, I'm still on high school. All right, so after we kind of, for special education, it's very important that we get those final numbers, probably more than, maybe not more than our general education population, but we have a whole lot of course, paperwork and everything that revolves around individualized educational plans for each individual student. So I met with all of our special education staff yesterday by age group, and we kind of discussed a lot of the process and a lot of the options and a lot of the paperwork and things, meetings that are going to need to happen with parents in order to make virtual and in-person options work for our special education students. So just kind of maybe in order to kind of make this make more sense, we need to get our final numbers from our parents at the end of the day, by the end of the day tomorrow, because even though a parent may choose all virtual or all in-person options for the general ed piece of it, it may be a little bit different for students with special needs. So for instance, in-person, if they choose in-person, then of course their individualized education plans are going to be implemented as they're already written, with the exception of sometimes, you know, children change or adaptions and modifications to the IEP need to happen, you know, at the beginning of the school year as normal. But basically, we're going to be able to implement the IEPs as written if they're coming in person. If they choose virtual, Then we are asking our case managers to contact the parents of the children who choose virtual, and as an IEP team, determine through either an IEP meeting or an amendment to the meeting. So with all of the related service providers and all of the special education staff that work with the students, to determine how those services in the IEP and how those goals are going to be worked on. Because although a parent may not feel comfortable sending their student to school in a classroom of 20 some odd kids, you know, on a regular basis, they may feel like if a student needs to come in for speech therapy or OT, PT, because OT and PT are hard to deliver virtually. Speech and language, I mean, all services can be a little harder to deliver virtually, but when you're talking about fine and gross motor skills, you know, our OTs and PTs are working on a lot of ideas in order to make that happen, like creating some like boxes of items that we can send home with some of those students if they choose full virtual, in order for them to do some online work with these materials in hand for them at home. But it's a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder to provide those services virtually. So if a parent has this meeting with the staff and they determine that, wow, you know, for the majority of the day, we really need to keep our student home to keep them safe, but I'm comfortable with them coming in for these services because it's in a smaller group and we feel like, you know, they would be a little bit safer, then we will work with parents to come up with those services and options that they feel comfortable with. So in those in-person services would then look similar to what's currently in their IEP. But then if they don't feel comfortable and they're still wanting to keep their child home full-time, then we would look at the same types of modalities that we would be using in our virtual general ed classroom. So, you know, Zoom sessions, you know, online meetings with students and families, consultation, you know, all of those things that we would be doing within the general ed virtual types of instruction. So case managers will be calling actually they will have to call all parents of all students with IEPs to set up a amendment meeting for another reason that I'll talk about in a minute. But they're going to start with those students to pick virtual so that they can find out, are the special ed services also going to be virtual or are they going to be in person? And then from there, they have to start building schedules and they have to start looking at caseloads and figuring out which of their teachers in their building are going to teach virtual, which are going to teach in person, and some of them may end up teaching both based on their availability. When I say both, it doesn't mean that they're going to be doing all access. It means that, you know, maybe Charles has 10 kids on his caseload and he has 2 students the first hour that he's going to work with virtually because his other students are in the classroom, and then the next hour he might be working in person with students. So most of the day those teachers would either be doing all virtual or all in person or a little bit of both you know, during the day. I've had some staff ask though, can we still do some simultaneous instruction? So if you have a social group, right, and you have one student and that social group who's at home, it can be very difficult possibly to work on those skills by themselves. And so they were asking, can we do a social group or a social language group and actually have that webcam there so their small group can participate all together? So that would maybe possibly be another option. So that would be a small group. We're not talking about a whole classroom like we would be talking about in our all access plan, but it would be individualized per the teacher, per the students in that class. Let me see what else. Okay, so once they're all determined, we've asked administrators to work with their staff in their buildings to help build those schedules. Special ed teachers a lot of times are already used to kind of building their own schedules because they come in and they work around what time is first grade library and first grade art and all that. So they're building those schedules a lot on their own. So the administrators are going to work with them on getting those schedules and caseloads worked out. So with that being said, at the bottom of my slide here, it talks about for all students with IEPs, case managers are going to have to contact parents prior to the first day of school to discuss and document what services are going to look like if a short-term or long-term closure happens. So what that piece means, sorry, I'm like sweating under here now. So what that piece means is last year, whenever we did close down, our special ed staff was asked to kind of write like a temporary plan for each student. So, you know, where in the general ed setting, everyone kind of had the same plan. These are the hours you work. This is the type of, you know, the type and the amount of instruction. But for our special education students, our special ed teachers reached out and came up with a plan for each of our students that were at home in order to determine how their services could be best implemented. We know that at that point, we weren't nearly as prepared as we are now. So the state had a form called the Continuity of Education form and an e-learning form where they documented all of their services and their plans for the rest of the year. Well, that form, of course, if you've ever worked in special education, you'd realize that things change quickly, especially with paperwork. That form is no longer even in existence. There's a new form called Form G. It is all about short-term and long-term closures. So basically, even before COVID, and you all have probably heard about this, even before COVID started, the state was creating a plan with districts about if we had snow days, could some of those be made up virtually? And so this year with our AMI, Alternative Methods of Instruction Day, there's the short-term closures. And then if we would shut down as a district, we'd have possibly have a long-term closure. So for every student with an IEP, starting the school year before any closure could possibly happen, every student has to have this Form G in their IEP with what services are going to be offered if we have a short-term closure, which is up to the 6 days, snow days, you know, or inclement weather days, and what would the plan look like if it's a long-term closure. So every single IEP for every student with special needs in the district has to include this plan now in it by the first day of school. And we have about 900 some odd students with IEPs. So with that being said, our staff has already, as of today, started calling parents and trying to create some of these plans and get these plans going. So I've had a lot of questions from parents like, what will my services look like for my student who has an IEP? How will that look for me? It's individualized, just like it is every other day of the school year. It's going to be a team decision with our case managers calling and setting those meetings up, which will be virtual because we're trying to keep, you know, as many bodies out of the building as possible. So if at all possible, it's going to be virtual. But yeah, so that's kind of how special ed looks. Of course, it's always unique and it's always individualized. So there's not a whole lot of it has to be this way or it has to be that way. It's going to be a team decision, and then if things don't work, then we take it back to the team and we modify it as we need to.
Julie?
Yeah.
You mentioned that if a student who had chosen, decided they needed to come in for one of their classes, who handles the transportation for that then?
So at this point, we are able to offer all of it virtually. I mean, if we can do it. So I think if we were going to pick and choose just certain services in person, if it's not at the beginning or the end of the school day where transportation can happen naturally, like where they can ride the special education bus or the regular education bus, then we would hope that parents could provide that transportation the other way. That's not to say that we absolutely wouldn't provide transportation, but I think we would have to really look at could the services be delivered all virtually then? Because there just isn't
that kind of.
Yeah, it's just a little complicated.
And for students who are extremely self-contained kiddos. They wouldn't do a virtual option to start with.
We have a lot of parents that are in our self-contained classrooms, and some of our most significant needs this year.
Even those one-on-one kinds of needs?
Yes, in some of our most significant district-wide classrooms, right now we have about half the students going virtually and half of the students going in person. And so with that being said, talking to some of the teachers in those classrooms, some of those parents have already talked to them about bringing them in for just a smaller amount of services and not being within the building the whole day.
What about the medical needs?
Again, it's most of our parents that have students that have pretty significant medical needs have selected the virtual.
Really?
For obvious reasons, because they don't feel like their child's safe at school. For some of our classrooms that have students with some kind of maybe extreme behaviors of maybe, I don't know, that we've I don't really want to go into like too many, but we have like extra protective equipment for our teachers and our staff in those classrooms as well, like face shields or things to protect our staff.
Okay.
Well, some students have a hard time keeping the 6 feet.
Yeah.
So it's all right. We love them. So.
Okay, I guess we're down to financial implications. The next slide here. I should preface probably my comments by saying, obviously, the finances are not nearly as important as making sure we serve our families well and efficiently and with what they need. However, we know that we're a people business, and so really we really do have implications when we're talking about staffing. So you see those two first bullet points there. As we've reallocated staff, Dr. Lewis and his folks are really looking at how many long-term subs are we going to have to add based on people who we already know are not going to be immediately returning to us. How many additional teaching or staff positions are we going to have to add in order to serve our students? How many teachers are on long-term sick leave or FMLA leaves? So all of those items do have to ultimately be assigned some kind of dollar figure. And so we'll adjust the budget as we go on that. I am talking in generalities tonight, but starting next month, I do have a pretty nice spreadsheet that I'll be able to start sharing with you that will show specifically budget additions or either as far as revenues or expenditures based on the pandemic that I think will be helpful to us as we move forward. We'll just kind of update as we go. But other things that fit into this list of either added expenses or revenue changes, including, obviously additional cleaning and sanitizing, the added labor hours from our facilities department, hand sanitizer, soap, supplies, plexiglass and other shields, the hand sanitizer stations in our buildings and on buses. We've got a lot of personal protective gear for our nurses and other frontline folks that are going to work with students, understandably, but that comes at a cost. So we are getting some provided to us. Jason said, is it the county that has masks that they're going to provide to us? But the vast majority of what we've purchased as far as gowns and shields and masks and sanitizing equipment for our nurses has all been at our expense thus far. Technology expenses, obviously when you're becoming more flexible and being able to offer students either an online or an in-person environment, we need technology for teachers and for those families. So that's added equipment, added labor in tech department for services, as we talked about earlier, added infrastructure in terms of making sure that hotspots are available to families that don't have other access to wireless networks, making sure that our wireless infrastructure can handle the load. And we think that all of that is in place, but again, it comes with some added costs. The CARES Act, which was the federal pandemic stimulus act that was passed several months ago, did provide some added revenues, provided them all across the board to county, city, state, and school entities. So the masks that we're receiving from the county are no doubt out of their revenues. But the revenue that was allocated to our district, $685,000 approximately, that we have already coded against spending that we did during the fourth quarter of last year. That may sound a little strange, but the rationale for that is there may be some additional funds available from either the state or the federal governments for technology, personal protective equipment, cleaning, those types of things. And so we did not want to allocate our existing allocation of pandemic funds for those purposes when we may be able to have the opportunity to do that down the line. So we've just continued to buy what we've needed, knowing that we may or may not get reimbursed for that. State funding on the negative side has been cut twice in the last 2 months, and transportation funding has also been cut. Part of ongoing state funding is gaming revenues. When the casinos were closed for 6 weeks, that eliminated about $1 million a day to state coffers. They are, of course, back and operating, but they're not back up to the same levels that they were. So if you all would go down to Ameristar on your way home and lose a couple $100, that would help us a little bit, please. And then sales tax also continues to be down. So if you're not willing to do that, at least stop at the grocery store and spend some money, because we do get a little bit of sales tax revenue, and that continues to be down. So the unknowns really are what's going to happen in the overall economy. If we don't regain jobs, income tax will fall dramatically next year. And then also unknown next year is what, if any, impact we'll have on local reassessment and new construction. And so that's just the very, very nutshell version of things that we're watching related to our costs. We're trying to be judicious in the way we spend. So I would tell you that we're, on the one hand, being very conservative in the way we approve spending. We've put in measures to make sure that principals and other managers are being much more watchful and of the budgeted funds that they already have. I mean, I'm not saying allowing them to go over, but just, if we've given them a budget, we typically have given them fairly wide latitude. They still have the latitude to spend according to their needs, but we're asking them to put another set of eyes, another review on that, and then we're reviewing more closely here at central office again before those things are purchased. But on the other hand, I'll tell you that we are spending more liberally in terms of making sure that we're going to be able to start school well. So that may sound, we're talking out of both sides of our mouth here, and that may be in fact the case. We're trying to be very conservative in many areas, but we also know that if we need PPE for teachers, we need sanitizing or cleaning equipment, if we need technology to start, we have to get those things now. So that's the basic financial implications. And like I said, this will be an ongoing topic that we'll continue to talk about in months ahead.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Lori.
Marn?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay, and it was like one of my last, and I'll put it under financial. And this costs money. I know, like when my husband was out of work, before he went back to work, everybody took a test so they could start from ground zero. Mm-hmm. And my question is, is there a way possible our staff, prior to the first day, before the kids come in, can go to our Bridge Center or whatever and get a test so we start? Right now, nobody has it, okay?
Right.
And I don't know if the insurance would cover that or anything, but I don't know. It might be nice to start, like I said, completely COVID-free and then add from there.
Do you want to address, Jason, what we've heard from the health department related to employee testing and the value of that? Or
Well, on.
Yes.
So I certainly a good thought there of what we could do there. What we're hearing from the health department too is even when you're exposed, you really shouldn't even get a test 5 to 9 days afterwards. So in some cases, and we've worked through our own cases and the other things I've talked with the health department, in my words, you're kind of chasing a ghost at times. You just are. We know situations where people go to get a test just to see, and you're right, they will come up and they're positive. So, and then, oh man, they really think they have it because somebody else had it and they're negative. I mean, it just, so I think it's a good thought. I don't know if with the feasibility that we can get everybody tested and that would do us, it's just kind of like the temperatures. People think, oh man, you know, we need to give temperatures every day. That really doesn't tell us a whole lot either. I think our biggest thing will be, so again, pretty good thought. I think at this point, the feasibility will be tough. I think right now it's self-check assessments, trying to keep the symptoms out, and then when they're sick, isolated very quickly, and then go from there with the tracking once we get a positive test.
Yeah.
But I applaud you for thinking, a little bit outside the box and proactively. I just don't know if the proactive part is really there with COVID, just because we're kind of chasing a ghost, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is it practical to do it? Potentially, we can do tests in our health center for about $25 a piece, so they're not extraordinarily expensive, but getting them back is the issue, and whether if it's 9 or 10 days before you receive the test back, then it's almost useless, because those people have continued to circulate, and so it's hard to get that one moment in time, Lori, that you're talking about, because I thought the same thing at one point, that, if we could start with a super clean slate, that'd be awesome. But we would know that we had a clean slate 10 days ago. We wouldn't know that we had one today.
So, can I just say this to your point? I just talked to one of our former principals on the phone, and he is working with a company, and again, I don't mean to go down a rabbit hole, but there is technology out there that's very, very close to being approved, where just basically a simple prick of the finger test will tell you three or four things of information about COVID. So I think if and when we get that type of testing available, I think that could be something, because it's very, very quick getting back.
Okay, adding to that, I just need to clarify this for myself. Every time a student or staff member tests positive, will we have them all of those who were quarantined test again upon re-entry?
So when there is a positive test, we will directly, because we'll do our tracking, we will send all that information. We will send that. We are supposed to send that directly to the health department. Health department at that point will take over the case and directly talk to those people about what the next steps are. Typically, what I'm hearing, and this sounds a little different, because again, and this information changes a lot. It can change too and evolve. If you are positive, you're looking at least 10 days out. And the health department will give them a specific note that says you can, and give us paperwork from the health department that says you can come back. The health department has clearly told us they want to do that process. If you are somebody who has to quarantine because you were affected and you were there within 6 or 15 minutes of the person, you're probably looking at 14 days, and you also get a note that says to come back. Julie, do you want to add anything to that, because you're part of that protocol with the nurses?
That was, as we've been talking with the nurses all summer and kind of coming up with protocol, that's been kind of the toughest piece of it. So on Tuesday, we received like a flow chart from the Department of Health that pretty much stated that, yeah, they're going to be the ones that say if a student has had COVID, when they can come back. And also it's the same thing for those students that were within contact traced, that the health department will get those names, send them an official letter, and then again will tell us when they can come back. So a lot of that is actually in their hands and not ours. So it's kind of nice in a way.
But let me just quickly chime in, Lori. Prior to what the health department sent us, any employee that has tested positive, the directive is contact your family physician or use the bridge. If you test positive, before you come back, you get another test and test negative. We've had 3 or 4 cases like that, and we're actually in one right now. That can get dicey if you continue to test positive. However, I don't think you can come and work and be positive and have everybody around you feel okay about that. So what we've done now is say, okay, we're accepting, doctor's notes and letting, again, this is prior to what we just received, but, you test. If you have symptoms, your family physician says, hey, you're going to quarantine for 14 days, you have a return date. If they ask you to take a test and you test negative, that's fine. You continue to quarantine, you can come back to work. However, if you test positive, then after the quarantine of that positive test, you take another test. When you test negative, you send us the doctor's note, you're free to return.
And in a nutshell, if you're an adult and you're a staff member and you have a positive test or you have to be quarantined, that goes straight directly to Rodney's office. If you're a student and you have an issue, that will be done, tracking and those things will be done by the nurse and the administration in the building. Okay, we're ready to move on. We'll go to district. Thank you, Charles. We'll go on the district alternate plans. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time with this. We've already talked about this somewhat. Kind of when do we use alternate plan and what can we expect? We talked about at this point, the community spread in the county is obviously not what we're using because we're going to school. We're going to be looking at the percentage of the cases in our building and what that looks like, but also the feasibility of keeping school open if we have staff members who can't come into work, not because of COVID, but because of symptoms and sickness, and what does that look like? But if we had to go to a district hybrid, everybody kind of wanted to know what that would look like. It's 2 days in person, 3 days virtual, half of students attending on in-person days. The biggest goal, or the biggest reason why we would do this, is if our schools are overcrowded and we could not social distance to the point where we want to. And currently, our health department is telling us that what we have shared with them on our plans, all access, and now, and then also the pull out the virtual, and our class sizes where they're at, and what we're doing for social distancing, we feel like we can stay in person, and we have given that go ahead from them in terms of support of us opening. We would go to a hybrid only if we think we still can be in person and our schools are overcrowded and we couldn't do that. If it's a district closure for 100% virtual again, that might be something that happens very quickly. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but we've kind of talked about the reasons why already for that. Quite honestly can we have enough staff work and keep the buildings open? And then really it would be a percentage of COVID tests per the building. And hopefully if we do, again, I've said this 3 or 4 times, if we do tracking the correct way, if we do preventative measures the right way, we do tracking the right way, preventative, isolation and tracking, then hopefully we won't have to shut down a whole school district. Maybe it's just a class, maybe it's a building, and we will go from there. All teachers teach. Let's talk a little bit just about these quick. I'm going to let Danielle go through it, but just so people know exactly what the online learning looks like real quick.
So if we do go into an all-district closure where everybody is virtual, all teachers would be teaching virtually then as well. And so, again, this would not be what it looked like in this. I'm on. I'm on.
We've had more trouble.
It won't be what we experienced in the spring, where everything was condensed and reduced down because we were really navigating through that pandemic. The intent with this, if we do close, is that it still will.
Uh-oh. Should I go home? Excuse me. Sorry, Deanna.
That's okay. The intent with this is that it still will look very similar to what our school day does look like now. It doesn't mean that they are going to be on the screen all day, but it does mean that the teacher would have an option of doing a combination of learning activities for students. So some of the time could be live instruction, direct instruction, but there also could be times that pre-recorded content is appropriate, potentially for intervention or enrichment or reteaching opportunities, there would be virtual activities that students might engage in, typical independent practice of homework projects, reading, that kind of thing. So It would follow the curriculum like the normal classroom would. We'd have same expectations for independent work, assignments, same grading protocols would be in place. So this time around, if we go into that situation, it will be similar to the school day with similar curriculum, similar expectations.
Thank you, Danielle. We are on our next steps and discussion, which is the last slide. Can I get a clap for that? Okay. Very quickly, here's our next steps. Brendan's clapping. Finalize staffing. Obviously, Rodney's working on that, and that's a lot of work, but we're getting there. Solidify parent communication, making sure that parents know exactly what's happening. We've done a great job with that tonight, but getting information home, not only from the district level, but also from the school level. Solidify teacher communication expectations, working with our teachers. We are setting up a process of make sure we can answer their questions, also provide PD and make sure they're very clear on what is going to happen when we start school. That's to set the teacher process to review, answer questions. We're going to finalize our plan for August 24, 26 PD. I just said that. And then we are still wanting to start school on August 27th. With that said, any other conversations, discussions, or questions?
Yes, is it reasonable to start on August 27th?
We hope to start on August. That is our goal.
Okay.
Yes, it is reasonable. If it wasn't reasonable, I wouldn't tell you. We are. I'm just saying. I mean, we feel like at this point we have a great shot of doing that. If something now. I say that, Marina, I call you next week, you're like, you just told me you could go. So I wouldn't say it if I didn't think we want to be here on the 27th with kids and start. If that is an issue, we will let you know as soon as possible. Rodney, it's pretty much going to be your show. Well, no, it's filling these positions. And let me say, because
No
Marina,
pressure, Rodney.
What?
I
Marina,
said no pressure.
I understand your question, Marina. I'm glad you said it again. It's because there's a lot of work still to do with staffing. You think we can get it done, right, Rodney, just to make sure?
Well, obviously, it depends on how quickly we can fill the positions that need to be filled to start. So if there was only one caveat there, it would be, can we fill those positions? And obviously, if we had, I'm not advocating that you vote as a board for more time, but if we, from my lens, if there was an opportunity to have more time, it would just to be to solidify the positions, make sure staff know where they'll be teaching, at least for the first semester. That would be where I would say, if we needed more time, at least from my lens, it would be there. Because not only looking at the staffing, but then once they're reallocated, then giving them time to get ready to do this new job if we needed to work from within. And if we're working out, then we got to acclimate new people to our school district. So staffing is certainly going to be a concern moving forward.
Thank you, Rodney. So Marina, back to your point. If we have to feel like we have to extend it, we will reach out to you. We should know by next week. I don't think we want to say automatically push back right now, because to be honest with you, that's the Thursday, the 27th. I wouldn't want to go any further than Monday, the 31st. So I don't know what 2 days does for us in terms of extending it. Now, again, I could eat my words and I have to call you next week and said, come in, and you're going to say, I told you so. I told you to answer the question the right way the first time, right, Marita? So are you smiling at me? Okay, thank you. So long story short, we would like to start on the 27th. We still have a shot for that. And if there is something that we feel like we can't, we will let you know next week.
My fear is that it's not fair to the parents. Right now we're only 2 weeks out. So if we have to push it out, which I don't necessarily want to do, but I'd rather do it now than wait. But it just depends on the severity of the need.
Where are you right now in the hiring process? Like are you actively interviewing? Are you are these people? You know what I'm saying? Like, where are you at in the hiring process?
Discussed earlier, as we're talking, about staffing, these numbers will probably make a little bit more sense. So as we haven't filled the 3 immune compromised positions. We haven't filled the 3 that took FMLA. We still have currently 13 positions that need to be filled before September 21st for maternity leaves, and we still haven't filled the two class size hires that we need to do. So to answer your question, that's quite a bit of staffing that needs to be covered. So you asked me where we are in the process. One, we just obviously all access didn't work, so we relooked at the schedules, recalibrated, and came back with this plan. So all of the positions that I just named, we have no one in place for that because we had to.
Right.
So that's where we are. Have we started? No. So now it's
Yeah, we lost you.
all right.
We do invest in some kind of.
Well, they're new batteries. He just replaced them. Chris just replaced them. So we need to look at the new numbers to determine what the official numbers are. Then we need to look at staff internal. So the only thing I'm trying to get at is that we haven't started hiring for anything that we need to move forward for maternity leaves, immune compromised, FMLA staff.
Can you give me an idea of what the market's like right now? I mean, is it saturated or are we?
Well, Jason reported that Fort Zumwalt posted 25 positions.
Okay.
Virtual or whatever they need. I would say that in a normal year, you have a hard time finding the subs. Now, obviously, with our sub pool, as I stated back earlier, they have some reservations about coming back as well. Some want to come back, but obviously some that have been with us for a while have reservations. So just in a normal year, all school districts struggle with subs. Staffing, if from my end, if you don't have the people, it's going to be hard to come back, so we need the people. So
That's where repurposing might come in as well.
absolutely.
We talked about that.
So we'll determine as a central office team, as we talked about repurposing K through, it's really K through 4 because again, remember Jefferson's at this point is taken care of. So when you're talking about staffing specifically, we're talking K through 4 because that's where we do have some Jefferson with some other things, but by and large, we're really looking at K through 4, maybe a few at the high school. I just don't want to get too specific, but with who, but yeah. So that's where we are with staffing.
I think it also comes down to it's 2 days. So we could push it off. Would those 2 days be, how much would actually get accomplished with 2 extra days?
I would just be honest with you from my end. I don't look at it as 2 days. I look at it as another full week for me. From HR, I look at it as a full week. So from that 24th, you asking my opinion. So from the 24th to Friday, that Friday, and then starting back on the 31st. For me, it looks like okay. Well, that gives us a full week to get it set in place. Could we have it before? Potentially. I just can't tell you today. Just depends on the people who comes out and wants to be a part of our district for the time.
And if we do push it back 2 days, does that, we pushed it back 3 days, and that didn't change the teacher contracted days. If we push it back another 2, will that change? Will that be made-up days?
Yeah, that 3 days, I think we were within our cushion.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be out of our cushion if we push it back 2, and we would have to tack on days at the end. We'll do everything from our end, from HR, to get this done. Okay, sure. We'll do everything we can. So,
Well, right now the teachers have approved the 27th.
Mm-hmm. Yes. To start on the 27th, we'll do everything we can to get it done.
Well, I'd like to ask the other people that are indirectly involved. Of course, we heard Dr. Seifert and Dr. Lewis, but Dr. Tormala, what do you think?
In terms of start date?
Yes, the starting date.
When we talk about from my department for our curriculum pieces, I feel like we can do our piece of it to get it ready to go by the 27th. I think that right now where we sit today, our biggest issue is exactly what Dr. Lewis explained.
Okay. So I wouldn't want to push anything on you. So what do you need?
He just told.
We need people. We need human beings, and that's what we need.
Besides that.
No, actually, Dr. Malone, outside of that, nothing. We need them to see a position, like the position, and want to come to our school district. That's all I need.
Then
Mike, Lori, what are your thoughts?
I'm like them, I'd like to get started on the 27th if we can, but you're the guy that's got to get that done. I hate putting it on you that fast, but, I like the idea to start on the 27th.
Well, the 27th was fine with me. Yeah, we moved it back, but, Rodney's under a lot of pressure here. I don't know. If we're going to move it to the 31st, it's almost like, because we're doing so many things, kind of have to have people in place. So then that just confuses the issue more, my thinking on it. But, we can't move it to October 1st either, so.
So I
Leslie, yeah, what are your
I have a
thoughts?
question. I just wonder, let's look at worst case scenario. So it's August 27th, we open up and we've only filled one position, or we filled none of those positions. What does that look like? What's that do to the rest of our staff, the people that are in place?
Well, I think quickly it would force us to repurpose staff very quickly. If you don't have them open and we need to have a teacher in that classroom, we're going to repurpose staff very quickly, and there's not going to be a lot of input and conversation. You know what? Honestly, I think if the date is the 27th, my department is going to work to make sure that we're staffed for the 27th. As a central office team, we'll go back and look at all of those positions to be flexible and try to use those quickly. But if the 27th is where we are, and I like the 27th as a start date, obviously it's 2 days. Let's keep it, and we'll work to make that happen.
Okay.
And we already have plans. We already have plans too, that on Monday, we're actually looking at a lot of this, where we're going to kind of create contingency plans. When we talk about repurposing staff, Rodney's going to have a really good idea of how many positions we're talking about. And we're going to have a backup plan where we're looking at non-teaching positions, and if push comes to shove, who can we move out of those support types of positions and put into the classrooms in the positions that we need most critically.
And some of those conversations have already happened. Not saying, hey, you have to move, but having some of those and we've had some people come to us and say, hey, I'm in this position, but I could do this. So what would it be?
I'm just saying that this plan was already worked out with our teacher group, and they expect and have agreed the 27th. So if we tonight decided to change it to the 31st,
But we don't negotiate
we
the
chose the
calendar,
27th.
They
That
didn't.
was our idea.
That was
last week.
I didn't mean
I
to.
think she just means they were okay with it.
I don't see any reason to change anything because everybody's okay with it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's make it clear though. There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
And
well, we know that.
but I want to make sure, because I was quick saying, hey, August 27th. There could, just so you all know, there could be a possibility that we have to come back to you and say, hey, this just didn't work out, or this didn't work out. You have to be okay with that. We're going to do everything we can to get ready for the 27th. It might be next week where we say, hey, we got to get together. We still might have to do a quick special closed session to hire some people. But we'll clearly make sure you know that we're not. I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. We all want to go for the 27th, and we will do everything we can. But there is a possibility we have to come back to you next week. But we're going to do everything we can.
All right.
I think then when you come back, it might be a whole week we have to extend, not 2 days.
And I know this is a board decision. We will have a conversation too with our SCA leadership just to kind of make sure, because I know you're probably thinking, man, there's a lot going on here, but we would like the 27th still. I'm assuming that's where you guys are at as well too, right?
Based on anything I've heard, I always go with member feedback on anything I go forward with. And right now, push dates are not something that's come up to me
Okay. And you can see that we weren't planning on pushing it back tonight. But again, it's reality that that could happen next week, but we hope that doesn't happen.
All right.
All right, do we have any other questions, clarifications on any of the plans?
I'll make a motion.
If not, we need a motion.
I move to approve the revised reentry plan as presented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
No.
All right.
I don't think Kelly heard.
Yeah, oh, there was one no. Yeah. No, not yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Understood, understood, yes.
Do we have to
That's-
have a roll
that's
call
fair.
vote?
No,
Oh.
we're good, we're good, we're good. All right. So I just, once again, I want to thank our teachers, I want to thank our administration, our principals, for working very hard over the last week to come to this agreement. And again, we know it's not perfect. We know it is going to be challenging. And again, thank you all very much for working on this. Item 7.01, tax rate hearing. Charles.
Yes, next month we'll present you a proposal to set the tax rate for this school year. We, by law, have to do that in a separate hearing. So by tradition, we have typically done that 15 minutes prior to our closed session time in September, which would be September 10th at 5:15.
Just need a motion.
I move we set a tax rate hearing date for September 10th, 2020 at 5:15 p.m.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
8.01, Secretary of the Board report.
So the Secretary of the Board's report, the ASBR, is a postmortem on our budget from the previous year. This is the only apples-to-apples comparison you'll get of Missouri school districts across the board. Everybody does the ASBR in exactly the same format. So I really am going to take just a very short amount of time here, but I just want to point out a few important pieces to it. If you look at this, this is about a 28-page report. It breaks out our finances in great detail in a multitude of ways. So I would encourage you to take a look at it in more depth if you'd like to. We always post it out on the website in case any patrons are interested every year after it's filed. But just beginning right below where you see Part 1 summary in the middle of the first page, you'll see our total assessed value as of December 31st. We were just over $1.1 billion. That's continued strong growth and strong new construction in our district over the last year. And then you see the basis of our accounting is cash, which for our purposes really just means we put something on the books when we spend it and we don't take it off the books until, we put something on the books when we receive it and it doesn't go off the books until we actually spend it. The other option is accrual accounting, which takes into account fixed assets, and there are significant differences in the way we account. But most districts use cash accounting. And so then just below that, you see the a levy, 2019 levy, unadjusted and adjusted. And you'll see that those match exactly for us. So our levy for last year was a total of $5.12, almost 13 cents. And I would anticipate this year's levy will be very similar. It'll vary by a couple of pennies, but it's going to be very close because 2020, just like every other even numbered year, is not a reassessment year. So the only changes are driven by inflation, which is still very low, and by new construction. But then you see our beginning balances by fund, total revenues, transfers in and out, expenditures, and then ending fund balances across the board. That's that line 3112 along the left-hand side, if you see that. And then 3412, right below that, shows restricted fund balances of $3.2 million. That's made up primarily of our self-insurance fund. About $3 million of that, 2.9, was in the self-insurance fund. The other $300,000 are restricted because they're student scholarship gifts that have been given to the school district, the largest of which is the Francis Story Scholarship Fund, which has about $232,000 in it right now. And that principal always remains unspent, and when we have enough interest, we give scholarships at both high schools, and it's obviously in Miss Story's honors, longtime teacher at St. Charles High. And then we have a couple of other smaller scholarship funds that are operated essentially the same way. The principal never gets spent, and we've had incredibly low interest for going on a decade or more, and so we are not giving these scholarships on an every year basis, but wait until there's enough interest to make it a worthy gift for our graduating seniors. But that makes up those restricted funds. At some points, we have also had restricted funds in professional development. If we did not spend enough, there's a state requirement that we spend at least 1% of all of our state funding on professional development. This past year, we spent that much, and so we don't have any carryover that's restricted for professional development. But that's generally the only other one that we would see in our general funds. Then if you look over in the capital projects fund, you also see we have just under $1.1 million in bond proceeds that are also restricted, because those are what was left on June 30 from our 2017 bond issue as we close out these last projects that are actually just within a few days of being finished over on the West Campus. The Monroe connecting hallway, Jefferson site work and office, and the St. Charles West Stadium concessions and restroom building. So that will finish out this 2017 bond issue. If you dig down in deeper, like I say, this begins by splitting into great detail where transfers were from one fund to another, and then you get into the revenue summary. Part 2, which is really pretty interesting. It shows where all of our taxes and our other revenues come from. By far the biggest portion of the money we spent, almost $55 million last year, came from current taxes paid by local citizens and businesses in St. Charles County. We've got another 2.3 in delinquent taxes. And then it delineates every other category from which we got revenue. And then we go into expenditures split by both object, meaning what type of fund, what they purchased, to function, meaning like elementary education or secondary education. And so there's a lot of detail here. But the bottom line is that we have to send this report to the state every year, no later than August 15th. And so I need you to approve the 2019-20 annual Secretary of the Board's report.
I move we approve the annual Secretary of the Board report for 2019-2020 as presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, carries.
One other point that I would make to you is in Part 1 summary at the very bottom line of that section I should have mentioned earlier is where you find the unrestricted fund balance that we've referenced multiple times when you've approved the agreements with the association. So that fund balance is the one that they and we check as we look back at our agreement. So moving on into your general financial reports for this month, you'll see the first page, as always, is the healthcare fund. And we had a really good month again. Medical claims, $365,000, which is about an average. And then the prescription claims just at $111,000. If you look back over the last year, you can see that our pattern in prescriptions is we have 1 month that's a little lower and then 2 months that are a little higher. And so this is our low month, which, if we're following pattern, we have some high dollar users that will probably hit the fund the next 2 months in RX. But, so we're right at $3,062,000 in the health fund. Next month, we will be bringing you recommendations for renewals for the employee health plan and all the other ancillary lines of coverage, dental, vision, life as well. And so that, I only mentioned that because we have a healthy balance here, which is really nice to see. It's not that much different from where it was a year ago. It's about $100,000 higher from where we are a year ago. So we've run really steady this year, meaning we have put in about as much money as we needed to operate the fund, which is a really good thing. Most of you will remember, our plan year runs January to December, and we approved a 0 increase in health in last fall. And so that was a bit of a gamble, but at this point I'd say we've seen that it was okay. We're doing fine.
Nicely done.
So then the next sheet, month end and the following one year end usually differ, but in July they're always identical. So I'm only going to look at the first one. Month end for July, you see combined balances in all funds, $33.9 million. And at the end of the month, we were down at an unrestricted fund balance of $29.5 million, including $2 million roughly in expenditures in the capital projects fund, as we've paid out most of that $1.1 million in bond proceeds that we carried over from the previous year. Any questions? And that's all I have.
The bottom line,
The bottom line,
20, what, where are we?
unrestricted in funds 1 and 2, 20 million.
20 million, okay. Thank you.
All right. If there aren't any other questions, we do need a motion, please.
I move we approve the financial report as presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I ask this every time. When I get here, how do I turn it off? How do I back out? I always wait for my little